Chapter 108. The Land of Chaos, Tansun Kulin Mountain Range. A man with dark brown hair kicked away a dead man hanging from his sword, and swung his sword to get rid of the remaining blood on the blade. Steam rose from his body and his entire body was red like a boiled crab. But only those who were familiar with him would know that this was the price he had to pay for using the curse. The man's name was Lodney. He was a level 3 source rank supernatural being, and was rather famous in the fringe. However, unlike his status as a high-ranking supernatural being, he did not have a prominent position or a huge fortune. He was a heretic. Heretics were not welcomed in most of the stable human kingdoms. The Austin Empire was an enemy of the theocracy and would accept a few heretics. Other than that, most of the heretics would live in war-torn lands or small kingdoms that lacked supernatural powers. The rest would move to the ungoverned lands at the edge of the human world to fend for themselves. Of course, as a high-ranking supernatural being, Lodney did not have to worry about social connections. When he was young, he did travel to various kingdoms with his passion. But after he was injured in an adventure and suffered from the aftereffects, Lodney stopped. He returned to his hometown and became the village chief of a heretic village in the Fringe. The Fringe was a very special place. The nobles of every kingdom knew that the Fringe often produced precious mutated life forms, or in other words, magical creature materials. But if they were to visit the Fringe in person, they would immediately be regarded as a lunatic. The reason Tansun was called the Fringe was because it was a place where nobles could enter but never leave. Be it the nobles of other kingdoms or the kings of small kingdoms, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. This was because the strength of the residents here was far beyond what the outside world could imagine. Pagans, evil cultists, these people who couldn't live anywhere else had to hide in the mountains for various reasons. Tansun was like a vacuum cleaner, constantly attracting these powerful people who had nowhere to go. This was a dangerous place where only the strong or those who had the protection of the strong could survive. Due to some unknown reasons, the land of Tansun was filled with powerful magical creatures. Every few years, there would be a disastrous beast tide. It could be said that this place was completely unsuitable for human habitation. After a long period of survival of the fittest, nearly half of the people living in this place were supernatural beings. They were powerful, but they were not rich. Therefore, whenever an outsider entered Tansun, unless they were a powerful dragon, they would be ruthlessly slaughtered by them. Usually, the residents of Tansun would build their own villages according to their own sex, and there would be alliances and wars between them. Even though the cultists had many beliefs, it didn't mean that they were brainless. They were equally disgusted with the vicious cultists. Rodney was one of those people who hated the cultists. After killing a member of the evil cult, the brown-haired man was already panting heavily. The evil cult member that had just died under his blade was not just any small fry, but a level 4 source grade expert. The difference between source rank 3 and source rank 4 was obvious. Originally, the difference should have been huge, but Rodney's injuries in his early years made it difficult for him to continue fighting. Furthermore, he wasn't facing a source rank 4. The man looked at the mountain forest that looked like a typhoon had passed through. There were already over 10 people lying there, and none of them had a complete corpse. Without a doubt, this was a fierce battle. But unlike the usual vendettas or fights over territory, the reason for this battle made Rodney very uneasy. These damned cultists were here to rob him. Snake God's Scale. This was an ancient curse item preserved in Rodney's village. As for why it was ancient, it started from Rodney, who brought it back to his hometown. Yes, this Snake God's Scale was brought back by Rodney from the outside many years ago. Rodney did not fight alone in the world back then, but he joined an adventurer group. The Shia world was too big. Currently, there was a large amount of undeveloped land outside of the known areas, but the scope of human activities had been constantly changing since ancient times. The so-called undeveloped land was actually very likely to have a civilization in the distant past. It could have belonged to ancient humans, or it could have belonged to an intelligent race in myths and legends. Not to mention the distant past, even the ancient Austin Empire, which was destroyed after the Turan Rebellion 1,000 years ago, had piles of human relics and good things. Many of them were even priceless now. Such a huge temptation naturally attracted countless people to embark on a journey of searching. Adventurer groups were spontaneous organizations that searched for treasures in ancient ruins. Some were big, some were small, and some were strong. There were all kinds of people in them, and it was common for them to have different countries and religions. As long as they had enough gold coins, everything could be accommodated. Adventurer groups were one of the few industries that the cultists could engage in stably. When Rodney was young, he was upright and powerful. He led his team and made a name for himself. But like many adventurer groups, even they could not escape bad luck. If you often walk by the river, how can your shoes not be wet? It was common for adventurer groups, who were accompanied by danger every day, and even took the initiative to step into dangerous places. Rodney, who was once young and impetuous, thought that his team was the exception, but the final result was cruel. All of his companions were dead. Rodney was the only one who managed to escape with serious injuries. Along with him, the scale of the serpent god was brought out of the ruins and reappeared in the world. According to the dead scholars, the ruins they entered were at least 2,000 years ago, before the establishment of the ancient Austin Empire in the Second Era. The scale of the serpent god was a collection enshrined in the ruins. It was estimated that it was at least 1,000 years old. After his team was wiped out, Rodney was disheartened. He was unwilling to sell his team's last loot to a merchant. So he brought the inconspicuous treasure back to his hometown. But to his surprise, the black scale played a huge role in the fringe. Ever since the scale of the serpent god was brought back, the monsters in the fringe seemed to be afraid of something, and were unwilling to approach Rodney's village. The number of snake monsters in the vicinity also increased significantly. But miraculously, the snakes did not attack the villagers. On the contrary, they seemed to be protecting the villagers. Such a miraculous situation naturally attracted the attention of the people, and Rodney was elected as the village chief. From then on, the village went smoothly for more than 10 years, and the originally small village began to develop into a medium-sized village. Rodney's village had made a fortune with the scale of the serpent god. In a few decades, Rodney's village would have become one of the largest settlements in the fringe. But he did not expect that, for some reason, Tanson's Marta Merchant Guild had set their sights on his village. Marta Merchant Guild was one of the few local merchant guilds in the vicinity of Tanson. On the surface, they appeared to be an ordinary merchant guild that supplied raw materials to various countries. But Rodney and a few others knew that they were actually a whitewashing organization organized by the cultists. Since half a month ago, during the new year, the Marta Chamber of Commerce had gotten wind of the scale of the serpent deity, and came to negotiate with Rodney. At first, they wanted to buy it at a low price, but after being rejected by Rodney, they revealed their true nature and planned to kill and rob without any capital. However, while dreams were plentiful, reality was harsh. How could a village that could produce a genius like Rodney be an ordinary place? Rodney's village was made up of the descendants of the cultists who possessed the power element. According to legend, the power element was passed down from the ancient giants. They were powerful fighters, but they had to pay a heavy price. Historically, their ancestors had relied on their extraordinary abilities to roam the theocracy. But they were forced to flee due to a great calamity. Ever since then, they had taken root in the fringe Tansun. Therefore, although Rodney's village did not have many supernatural individuals, they were all very good fighters. The cultists had kicked an iron plate, and were killed on the spot. At first, Rodney didn't pay much attention to the incident. There were too many cultists in the fringe, and they were as plentiful as wheat. Their leader probably wouldn't even notice that they were missing. But what he didn't expect was that the cultists and Marta Merchant Guild weren't the cultists who had set their sights on them. It was a larger organization. Chapter 109. You saw the revival of the ancient gods last night? Oh, I see. At the edge of the forest, in the middle of a large group of sword-wielding cultists, Steamed Crab, Rodney weakly responded to Old Wood's words with a pitiful expression. The gray-haired and white-bearded Old Wood was the previous village chief of the village. He had been in charge of the village for many years when Rodney was young. Originally, he had retired after handing over the reins to Rodney, who had returned from a long journey with treasures. But this time, the village was in danger. There were many enemies, so Rodney had no choice but to ask the old village chief for help. Old Wood was a level 3 source ranker. Although he was old, he was more than capable of dealing with some level 4 source rankers. But as the saying goes, every family has its own difficulties. Old Wood did not collapse during the battle, but after the battle, the price he had to pay was easily reversed. Old Wood's price was very simple. It was stupidity. From the perspective of a Luoya modern person, it was a bit like Alzheimer's. Therefore, when Wood descended from the sky and began to tell Rodney about the resurrection of the gods, Rodney felt that this guy was crazy. However, Wood was the former village chief, and Rodney, who respected the old and loved the young, could not refute him. He could only say, "Yes, yes, yes, yes. Damn it. Brat, I'm telling the truth. I've paid the price. I'm not crazy. Yes, the village chief is wise. Do you have anything else?" Curry. You tell him." Looking at Rodney, who was trying to play with him, Old Wood beat his chest and stomped his feet in anger. In the end, he had no choice but to pull over a young man with a dog. The blue-haired young man named Curry stroked the dog and began to testify for Old Wood's words. "A few?" "Yes, and we all described it afterwards. The scene we saw was basically the same." Curry stroked the dog's head and began to describe in detail. Those who had spirit vision were all extraordinaires who had obtained origin substances and were inclined towards magic. The scene they saw was slightly different, but it was generally the same. The image of a young man standing on the shoulder of a giant skeleton. Did you see it clearly?" Rodney finished steaming and asked for details with a confused and doubtful expression, but the answers he received did not satisfy him. The giant skeleton could be explained as the giant's appearance after death, but the young man standing on the giant's shoulder, no matter how one looked at it, didn't they have an equal relationship? But how could humans be on equal footing with giants? Giants were a race on the same level as angels in myths and legends. It could be said that their concept was not much different from that of gods. Would such an existence allow a human to step on their shoulders? But it really is a human youth. That height and build, but I can't see his face clearly. Curry, you don't understand. This is very normal. Most of the great existences can't be seen directly. From this point of view, that young man may be the messenger of God. The emissary of God is the Holy Son. Yes, the Holy Son. Wait a moment. Rodney stood up and stopped the two excited people. He began to pull the dog-headed guard captain and the intermittent Alzheimer patient back to reality. The pagans were different from the Shia believers. Although they were divided into different sects and had different origin substances, many of them did not believe in the gods of their sections. One of the reasons was that their identity as a pagan did not bring them any benefits. Another reason was that most of the gods of their sects had already died, leaving only the origin substances for humans to use. The pagans in Rodney's village all belonged to the faction of the origin substance power. Most of them had respect for the ancient gods, but that was when the ancient gods died or were in a deep sleep. When the source of the power, origin substance awakened again, they would definitely be affected. On the bright side, the awakening of the ancient gods would strengthen the entire origin substance. All the pagans who used the power, origin substance would gradually become stronger in the future. It was like the appearance of a leader activating the entire team. The closer they were to the source, the stronger they would be, and the smoother their development would be. But from a bad point of view, the ancient gods were terrifying existences on the path of ascension. They were likely to influence individuals downstream through the connection of the Sapphira. The most typical example was the conversion of some pagans into cultists. Many pagans did not become cultists of their own volition, but the corruption of the ancient gods upstream of the Sapphira had affected them. This subjective uncontrollability could be said to be an important reason why the mainstream human community refused to use the origin substances other than the three major origin substances. Now Rodney and the others had to face such a risk. From the situation of spirit vision, it seems that he has no intention of controlling us. Of course, it could also be that our gazes are not threatening at all and did not attract his attention at all. Wood stroked his beard and said. Wood said while stroking his beard, Just like how humans would not notice the eyes of ants when they were walking, it was normal for great beings to ignore small human beings. However, from this point of view, ignoring them seemed to be equivalent to not knowing how to manipulate them. It seemed to be a good thing. If we can find that young man, the Son of God, we might be able to ask for the protection of the gods through him. But the location? The old man frowned and sighed. So far, they had too little information, and there was nothing they could do. Rodney listened for a while, reorganized his emotions, and began to talk about his findings. I know what you're talking about, but we don't have the time to discuss it in detail. The Marta conglomerate has their eyes on us. They want the scale of the serpent god. It seems that there's a force that wants to buy it at a high price. I just forced them to tell me this. There's a force behind the Marta conglomerate? Chapter 110. Inside the maze, Luoya leaned back in his chair and heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that his lifespan had accelerated today. After lunch and before dinner, Luoya felt like a year. The conversation with Nuair made Luoya sigh about the journey in the previous historical fragments. He also learned about the ending of the characters, but he didn't forget that one of them was still alive. He was still in front of him a few days ago. Felder is Brian? How is this possible? Even Nuair, who trusted Luoya completely, couldn't believe it. She had seen Felder with her own eyes. The loyal blonde knight had left a deep impression on her. And it was even quite a positive one. The difference between Felder and the venomous Brian was too big. Luoya, could there be a mistake? Maybe there's a mistake, because they're of the same bloodline? No, I think the result of the spell should be correct. Recalling President Alvin's advice and the disclosure of the internal investigation results of Sorophia, Luoya further strengthened his confidence in his skills. There shouldn't be a problem with the spell. Felder committed suicide in the historical records, but you know the contents of the history books. They can't be trusted at all. Even if he really committed suicide, with the power of Eric's family at that time, it's possible to find some strange method to resurrect him. That's true. The cultists have many such methods, and most of them will cause a drastic change in the personality of the resurrected person. Is this the reason? Nuair thought about the possibility of the cultists and discussed with Luoya. Finally, they decided to report this matter to the elders in the family. But this kind of thing without any evidence is impossible to investigate Eric's family. Well, I understand. I didn't expect this to affect them. I just want to remind you that there may be something darker behind Eric's family. Luoya's serious words made Nuair feel warm in her heart. The two talked for a long time, and it was inevitable that they talked about the kiss that caused the rumors outside. The black-haired boy looked at his lips in the mirror with an unnatural expression. In his previous life, he studied hard in high school, and didn't fall in love immediately after college. Nuair's kiss seemed to be his first kiss in 2 lifetimes. His face was a little hot when he thought about it. But what made his brain heat up even more was the look on Noelle's face when she mentioned it. The blonde girl said that it was just a treatment, but when she saw Luoya's face, she gradually began to pant. She bit her lips, stuck out her tongue, and licked her lips. She then narrowed her eyes and whispered in his ear. Oh, that was my first kiss. Hearing this, Luoya's heart trembled. He didn't know why Miss Angel suddenly became perverted. Nuair's breath on his ear made his heart itch. He had a strong desire to hug her, but he restrained himself in the end. Well, you didn't pounce on me? Why should I pounce on you? Roja was speechless as he looked at Noelle's face that said, You're not right. He suspected that she thought all the men in the world were idiots. This kind of narcissism. Well, she seems to have the capital to be narcissistic. Luoya looked at the almost perfect beauty in front of him. He suddenly felt that his willpower was too strong. A normal person wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of a princess like Nuair. After thinking for a long time, he thought that it might be because he watched too much AI Lizzie, which trained him to resist the perfect creature. So what if I pounced on you? Would you let me have my way? No, I thought that would give me a reason to step on you. Nuair was honest with her intentions. Luoya couldn't help but widen his eyes. Can you not always set so many traps? Because you've always rejected me. Even if it's me, I still want you to accommodate me a little according to my preferences. The blonde girl seemed a little lonely as she sighed. Seeing this, Roja's eyebrows twitched. After a while he asked, "What do you mean by stepping on me? Are you really willing to accompany me? It's actually very simple. You just have to lie on the ground like a dog." "I refuse." Luoya rejected the angel of abuse halfway through. Nuair was speechless and dissatisfied, but she didn't say anything. The two chatted for a while before leaving the room one after the other to have a tea party with Ai Lizzie. But Luoya didn't expect it to be a hellish afternoon tea party. Luoya was sandwiched between Nuair and Ai Lizzie by the window. He stared blankly at the forks the two girls put in front of him. Chapter 111. Luoya sat on the Gulandair's shoulder, overlooking the setting sun and the earth. Whether it was the ancient gods or the giants, they were existences that must be respected since ancient times. If it was in ancient times, standing on the shoulders of such a giant was only allowed to be a higher race. Existences like humans could only crawl on the ground and wait for their mountain-like bodies to pass by. It was normal for Rodney and the others to have doubts. No matter what era it was, humans were too far behind these ancient monsters. If they were the explorers of this world's extraordinary power, then humans were at most lagging behind by who knows how many years. Of course, these were of no reference value to Luoya. His current identity was that of a friend who had signed an equal contract with the Gulandair. For others, standing on the shoulders of the Gulandair was equivalent to counting down one's life, but for Luoya it was nothing. It was even more convenient for him to chat. "Gulandair, why did I see you?" After nearly half a month, Luoya was very happy to see the huge skeleton again in his dream. He finally confirmed that the Gulandair could also appear in the real world. However, Luoya had always been curious about it. If my bloodline ability is to enter those fragments of history and witness some things that have been forgotten by humans, then how did I connect with you? You died a long time ago, right? Luoya held his chin and pondered. The giants had long disappeared in the third era of Weidualia. The Gulandair himself said that he had died a long time ago. Then why did Luoya meet him? Bloodline ability? If it was bloodline ability, then what was the mechanism? It couldn't be a lottery, right? Luoya's question made the skeleton silent. The Gulandair's huge hand rubbed the bald skull, as if thinking about something. After I died and became like this, I forgot a lot of things from my life. My brain is a little empty. The Gulandair complained in distress. After hearing it, Luoya nodded in understanding. Powerful from nothing? Wasn't that so? His brains were all gone. The young man looked at the huge skull and complained in his heart. The Gulandair was still recalling. "In fact, I have met several people like you." "What? People like me?" "Yes, those who can enter the plains of eternal dusk." The Gulandair recalled the intruders he had seen in countless years. He said lightly, "There are about 5 or 6 intruders." "There are about 5 or 6 of them. I can't remember their specific appearances, but everyone is dressed differently. They shouldn't be from the same country." "No, I'm afraid that they are not from the same era." "Well, that's possible. After all, my concept of time." Gulandar rubbed his bald head that was wearing a crown. His eyes flickered as if he was reminiscing about the past. "Their strength is very similar to yours. One of the human women seems to be quite powerful as well." "Woman? A woman that you think is powerful?" The young man was surprised when he heard the unexpected news. He had seen the power of the Gulandair. To be able to get a powerful evaluation from him, she was probably the leader of the human supernatural power of an era. "Wait, such a powerful person came to you before. Why didn't you choose her?" "She didn't even listen to my question. She said that she encountered a great crisis and needed my help. She seemed to be in a hurry. But she is not my believer. I have no reason to help her for free." "I see. Wait, believer? What believer?" Luoya, who couldn't understand the words, turned his head in confusion. The Gulandair explained. Just like how humans use the 3 origin substances, the giant tribe also had an origin substance that was most suitable for them. It was called power. The so-called believers were simply the descendants of humans who used the origin substance developed by the giant tribe, and they formed a sect. Through special rituals, these later humans could transmit their prayers and offerings through the channel of the supernatural power system to the upper reaches of the system. This was the purpose of most of the rituals of various sections. According to the Gulen Daer, there would occasionally be similar messages that could be transmitted to him. It could be seen that there were still people in the outside world who used the power, origin substance. I see. Then this time when you go out from here, can they feel it? They should be able to. I can even control them. However, they are a group of little guys. They are not very useful. I see. Luoya nodded. The young man didn't know what level the little guys that the Gulen Daer mentioned were, so he didn't care too much about it. The giant skeleton returned to the starting point after running away from the topic. Chapter 112. They all have extraordinary charm towards the opposite sex, and they all fell into serious emotional disputes. Moreover, it seems that they all went missing when they ran away from home. This, looking at the biographical information of his ancestors, Luoya's head was full of question marks. He couldn't help but think of a certain plot where one who wants to wear a crown must bear its weight. According to the records, Vincent Aukat and Roy Aukat were both heroes of their time. Not to mention how they looked. In short, they were very popular with women. It wasn't difficult to understand that they were strong in the present age, and came from a noble family. However, the strange thing was that the women they provoked were also very fierce. Female generals of the empire, great scholars of Bologna, all of them were super fierce people. The facts proved that the same process could easily lead to the same result. Whether it was Vincent or Roy, they seemed to have been forced by the women. In addition, their fiancés were also not to be trifled with. Their own strength and family influence were very strong, causing the family to be very disharmonious. Sigh, they are really too unrestrained. Why did they provoke so many women? And they are all so abnormally strong. Aren't they pushing themselves to their deaths? Luoya put down the records and sighed with a regretful look. Then he suddenly thought of himself. Wait, this is related to my situation. It doesn't look like it at all. The black-haired young man laughed heartlessly. Nua Iyer was his protector and naturally wouldn't hurt him. Ai Lizzie wasn't interested in supernatural powers and wasn't strong. Most importantly, Luoya patted his chest and fully felt the progress and beauty of the era. Those who could arrange a marriage with the Aukat family were definitely not small nobles. They were likely to be big forces. Generally speaking, if one wanted to deny it, they would have to pay a huge price and the influence would be very bad. It was really troublesome. However, this kind of bad habit in his era ended with his father who loved freely. Sigh, let's not talk about it anymore. Father is awesome. Luoya revealed a bright smile. He still didn't know the fact that his father pulled his grandfather down. However, this wasn't important in his eyes at the moment. His real goal hadn't been achieved yet. Messing around and being a scumbag can increase one's strength? Could it be to be the Sea King? It can't be, right? If it's true, then he deserves to die. Luoya shook his head. No matter what, he didn't think that the crown would be activated in such a way. He had no choice but to look at the part he didn't want to look at the most. History and the exploration of ruins. In addition to their messy relationship, Vincent and Roy were also adventurous. Both of them were great archaeologists, and there was no doubt that this was very suspicious. However, the records had been destroyed, so Luoya could not find too much detail. He was helpless about this, but being in the holy capital gave him other means. Even if the Aukat family didn't have any records of these two, it didn't mean that other places didn't have records of these two. The black-haired boy closed the book and looked at Anna, who was standing quietly at the side. Prepare the car. We're going to the Royal Library. In an exquisite and elegant small space, the black-haired boy raised his teacup and took a sip of tea. He looked at the ancient book in his hand, and his heart was filled with emotion. The Royal Library of the Holy Capital was one of the most magnificent buildings in the Holy Capital of Lorraine. It had been built for 100 years, and although it was not as magnificent as the St. Pharaoh's Cathedral, it had the unique elegance of a scholar. Overall, It had a strong scholarly atmosphere, and a lot of effort had been put into the decoration. The reason why the Royal Library was called the Royal Library was naturally because the Heathcliff family had paid for it. It was obvious that the royal family had invested a lot in this library, but fortunately, the investment had paid off. The Royal Library of the Holy Capital was now one of the 3 great libraries in Xia. It had been famous for 100 years since it was built, and its name had spread throughout the world. The Holy Capital Royal Library of the Theocracy of St. Maester, the Millennium Glory Library of the Austin Empire, and the National Wisdom Library of the Kingdom of Scholars, Bulonia, were the 3 most famous libraries in the Xia world. These 3 libraries together held 60% of the ancient records of mankind, and could be said to be the symbol of the Xia civilization. The Royal Library of the Theocracy was the last of the 3 great libraries to be built. In fact, it was founded because of a dispute. The founder of the largest library in the Theocracy was Sanctus Lucas, who was the father of the current Sanctus John. According to the royal family secrets revealed by Nua Iyer, he should be the son of Vader, and the adopted son of Wei Dualia. Sanctus Lucas was one of the most interesting Sanctus in history. Perhaps he inherited it from his Chinibu father, Vader, or perhaps Wei Dualia spoiled him too much because he felt guilty. In any case, this Sanctus Lucas had an extremely high self-esteem, and he was the kind of person who could not bear the slightest grievance. Normally, it would be fine. The Heathcliff family was so powerful that no one in the Theocracy dared to offend them. However, as the saying went, no one could escape the beating of society, not even someone as powerful as Sanctus Lucas. The Xia Eastern Border Defense Agreement was an important agreement that all the countries in Xia had to sign every 30 years. The purpose of this agreement was to determine the defensive area and military deployment of each country at the eastern border, to guard against the aliens, and to jointly maintain the peace and development of the human world. As for why it was a 30-year agreement instead of a 100-year agreement, it was mainly because other than a few large countries, some small countries were dying too quickly. Often, the frontline soldiers of a country would not have enough food and pay, and they would simply die. Of course, there was a higher possibility that they would pretend to disband to escape the sanctions of the agreement, and then go back to reassemble and throw themselves into internal wars. This kind of operation basically happened once every decade or so. But the frequency of holding a world conference once every decade or so was too high. After all, transportation in Xia was not convenient. It would take the Sanctus a few months to travel to Austin and back. In addition, negotiations and wrangling would take even longer. Therefore, they simply chose a small country to double the average number of years it would take 30 years. The conference that Sanctus Lucas attended was held in the capital of the Austin Empire, Theo. The process of the conference was rather difficult. There was a lot of wrangling between several large countries. Among them, the Austin Empire and its old rival, the Theocracy, had a conflict, and it was at that time that Lucas was beaten up. Since it was a negotiation between the heads of countries, they naturally could not be locked in a room like a company meeting. Most of their negotiations would only take place once every 10 days or half a month. As for the time outside of the negotiations, they would usually visit each other and build relationships, or visit places of interest or attend banquets under the arrangement of the host. Chapter 113. Luoya had heard a saying in his past life. Gaining knowledge is the cheapest way to improve yourself. This saying was quite common in modern society, and it was even more important in Xia, where Luoya was now. Leaving aside the group of fierce people who had obtained the wisdom, origin substance for the time being, in this era where there was a serious shortage of intellectuals, being able to write or write well was a skill and a livelihood. Every large clan had to hire people to collect and organize their histories, so that they wouldn't even know their ancestors' names after a few generations. However, someone like Akkad, who even had records of his ancestors' XP, was definitely an exception. Luoya seriously suspected that he owed the recorder a salary, but now that he was freeloading off the government's records, there shouldn't be anything like that. At Luoya's request, the Royal Library's librarians went out in full force, gathering all the information on Luoya's 2 ancestors. The information was enough to fill up a table. With such a large amount of information, Luoya naturally couldn't go through it all. He could only look for the important points. After half a day of organizing and summarizing the information, Luoya's conclusion was roughly the same as Ponte's. These two ancestors didn't seem to be people who were content with their lot. During their reigns, they were quite active, and they were also very fond of adventuring and exploring ancient ruins. Luoya thought about it and felt that this was a clue, but it probably wasn't a method of accumulating extraordinary power. After all, no matter how many times they went out in their lives, they spent most of their time at home. According to the records, their strength had increased during this time. And if they couldn't get stronger if they didn't go out, what kind of otaku curse was this? It was a bit nonsensical. Luoya, who liked to stay at home, eat his fill, and sleep well, felt that people should be content with what they had and learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. After all, they had already lost two ancestors. Wouldn't it be stupid to follow the same old path? Luoya, who had decided to turn over a new leaf, continued to search through the relevant records, but unexpectedly, the crown, origin substance actually reacted. It wasn't obvious, but it was definitely absorbing magic. It slowly increased the rate at which Luoya's body mutated, increasing Luoya's strength bit by bit. Its speed was similar to stepping on the accelerator of a car. When Luoya sensed this feeling, he finally understood why the two ancestors were amateur archaeologists who loved history. It turned out that reading historical records was one of the ways to upgrade the crown, origin substance. But here Luoya discovered another problem. It didn't seem like all historical records. The sacred beasts who had source substance were the messengers of wisdom of Wuxia, who assisted the various races in battle during the mythological era. They followed the various races to open up new worlds. Some of them had quite high status. Those who chose to use their minds instead of their minds were not as ferocious, but they were very intelligent. Although there were no detailed records, legend had it that the ancient Austin Empire had a guardian beast in the Second Era. After the ancient Austin Empire was destroyed, when people came to this new land, they naturally encountered native creatures. Just as the ancient giants and angels had disappeared, the sacred beasts had also disappeared with the passage of time. However, some mutated animals with intelligence that could be roughly tamed still existed. These mutated animals that could be tamed generally had a good impression of humans. Perhaps it was because they had to deal with their own kind for many years. At that time, humans were also very welcoming to them and domesticated them, such as the warhorses of various countries, and the eagles used for long-distance communication. However, there were more mutated animals that could not be tamed and communicated with, and they became the nightmare of humans. According to historical records, the human countries at that time were still very weak. When they encountered the super monsters that occupied a piece of fertile land, there was nothing they could do. They often fought the monsters on a country-by-country basis, and there was no guarantee that they would win. How did the 5 noble families of the theocracy come about? They were the 5 most ferocious families who followed Heathcliff to open up new territories and fight monsters. It was not an exaggeration to say that the theocracy was conquered by the royal family. That was why they were the foundation of the theocracy in later years. It took nearly 200 years for humans to get rid of these super stubborn families step by step. In these 200 years, the number of humans and countries that died in the hands of monsters was too many to count. Historians called them the victims of the War of Expansion. Reading up to this point, Luoya felt a lot of emotions. He felt that this should be the story of how humans in this world fought against nature. Humans had many great achievements, but compared to conquering nature, Luoya felt that they were not qualified. Conquering nature itself was a symbol of human civilization, and it was also a kind of spirit. It had existed since the birth of humans. They hoped to be cool in the summer and warm in the winter. These were the most primitive motivations for human progress. Under the great goal of conquering nature, generations of humans sacrificed their lives and painted a colorful and magnificent life. Some of them opened up wastelands for farming, while others set sail. No matter how dull or passionate they were, there was a common belief that shined in their hearts. That was, humans can conquer nature. Wait a minute, so the development of our Akate territory is very low. Reading up to this point, Luoya, who was secretly excited, suddenly remembered the report he read in his home. When the theocracy was first established, the Akate family's territory was very large. They were even the leader of the 5 noble families. However, according to the division of power, the Akate family had never been the leader of the 5 noble families. The main reason was that the Akate family's land was undeveloped. Why was Eric so strong 200 years ago? It was because most of their territories were plains, which were suitable for farming and had a large population. Although their territory was not as large as the Akate families, it was the least difficult to develop among the 5 noble families. As for the other noble families, the Bafas family in the North Sea was fishing, the Lusen family had a large forest area, and the Wester family had many mountains. Chapter 114. In the palace, the gray-haired maid suppressed her excitement and walked towards her master's palace. Today was a day of special significance. It was the day that Mia had been looking forward to, and it was also a day that was a little sad. Today, the palace would hold a grand ceremony for the new Air princess to fulfill the royal mission and become the protector of the Akate family's heir, Luoya Akate. As the princess' personal servant, Mia would also work extra hard today. Personal servant was a relatively special position. Generally speaking, it would be carefully selected and the requirements were very strict. Especially in the big noble families and the royal family, the heir's personal servant would be strictly checked, and the status of the servant would not be too low. In fact, this was the case for Mia. Although she was the maid who served the new Air princess, she was also the daughter of a noble family, and her father's title was not low. In the years that she had been in this position, Mia had obtained substantial benefits for her family. Her father's official position was promoted, and the eldest brother in the family was also appreciated by the royal family. However, it had to be said that Mia was further and further away from her family. She came to the palace alone when she was in her teens, which was the most sensitive age. It would be a lie to say that she had not suffered any grievances, but she had no relatives by her side, so she could only hide everything in her heart. It was the same when she went home to chat during the holidays. Her family was more concerned about the royal family than her. Her father told her to work hard and win glory for the family, and her brother also asked if there was a better way. Sometimes, Mia felt that she was not so much a member of the family as a tool of the family. Her family's feelings for her and her feelings for her family had faded, but human beings yearned for love. Therefore, Mia placed her feelings on the princess who had accompanied her since she was a child. After several years of living together, Mia sometimes even had the illusion that she was Nuwa Ayer's elder sister. Of course, she knew that it was just a delusion. Nuwa Ayer's status was not something she could compare to. But even so, she could not help but want to take care of her. Hence Mia made her move. A while ago, Mia had used her connections to spread a rumor. It was a story about 2 children who were in love with each other and ended up being imprisoned. It was an explosive story that perfectly poked at most people's sore spot. Although she didn't mention any names, Mia had released some misleading information. Everyone already knew who the 2 people in the story were. Miss Mate's purpose was very clear. She wanted to create an established fact and create an environment where everyone was on the same side as her. After all, it was already a miracle for a Nuwa Ayer to fall in love with someone. Although in the eyes of outsiders, the princess was noble and elegant, benevolent and dignified, Mia, who had been with her for the longest time, could see that she had never really valued any of her subjects. She treated everyone equally. To a certain extent, she had no close friends. This phenomenon was very abnormal in Mia's eyes. People could not live without friends. They could live without friends for a period of time, but not all the time. However, Nuwa Ayer was an exception. Most of her peers were not easy to communicate with. Her strength was far beyond the imagination of other children. Geniuses were lonely. Nuwa Ayer, who was already high above others and a genius, was even more lonely. And although it was a little inappropriate to say this, Mia always felt that Nuwa Ayer was strange in the past 2 years. She remembered that once when she did something wrong and was supposed to be severely punished, The princess only stepped on her a few times. Nua Air was very light. She did not use much strength when stepping on her. She did not feel anything at all. Was this considered a punishment? And why did the princess look so excited after that? Well, the princess must not have the heart to punish me. She just wanted to go through the formalities. Mia thought so and finally found a reasonable reason. Then, she was even more touched. Sob sob, the princess is too good to me. The servant girl thought about this and walked to the bedroom door. She knocked on the door and entered after receiving permission. Your Highness woke up so early today. Well, actually, I can't sleep. Facing Mia's exclamation, the golden-haired girl replied with a bitter smile. Noelle, who was very strict with her body, didn't expect that she would have such a situation where she couldn't sleep well because of some things. You can't sleep. This means that you really value Luoya. Probably. Facing Mia's smiling words, Nua Air was silent for a moment. Although she was a little shy, she did not refute. In Miss Angel's eyes, her own feelings weren't something that needed to be concealed to begin with. A ruler's emotions were something that needed to be displayed, so that others could cooperate with her. And as the aggressor, she couldn't hide her emotions when facing the men of the Akat family. Wei Dualia's teachings were deeply ingrained in Nua Air's heart. No matter if it was Ponte or Luoya, when facing these guys, she had to deal a heavy blow. It would be best if she could win with a single blow. Even if she could not win, she had to at least push the other competitors to the ground to prevent any accidents. Recalling the silver-haired girl beside Luoya, Nua Air sighed helplessly. In fact, she was already one step behind when she set off. Ai Lizzie and Luoya met earlier, and their relationship was already formed. If Nua Air tried to be the bad guy and ruin things, not only would she fail, she might even cause Luoya to dislike her. Furthermore, with her identity, it would be inappropriate. It would be easy for her to be misunderstood as a member of the royal family, trying to sow discord between the members of the major noble families. Naturally, Nua Air would not do such a thing. Right now, the only thing that comforted her was that Ai Lizzie was still very naive. She did not directly reveal her feelings for Luoya. She was immersed in the intimacy brought by family, and she was probably afraid that saying such things would ruin their current relationship. Of course, it could also be due to her shyness as a girl. But none of this mattered. As long as she did not attack Nua Air, she would have plenty of opportunities. Mia picked up the bell on the table and shook it lightly. The crisp sound came from outside the door. A large group of maids swarmed in a few seconds after the bell rang. They tidied up the room, picked out a dress, and prepared makeup items needed later. Mia arranged for the princess to take a bath. The palace became busy. At the same time, in the labyrinth of the holy capital, Luoya was stunned by Anna's cold gaze and skillful makeup. Chapter 115. The royal palace of Saint Mestre was built 1,000 years ago. When humans first arrived in the West, the holy city of Lorraine was still one of the major hubs of the human race. It was used as a temporary command post. Later, after the founding of the theocracy, it was converted into a royal palace. It was one of the oldest buildings in the country. Being old meant being culturally profound, but physically it meant being old. However, the royal palace of Saint Mestre had been renovated several times over the past 1,000 years. It had even been rebuilt once due to a great fire. The most recent renovation was a few decades ago. Therefore, it did not look like an ancient building. Instead, it looked very grand. The overall tone of the palace was holy white. According to legend, it was the color of angel feathers that the architects had carefully mixed. Although Luoya did not know where the workers saw the angel feathers, the visual effect was indeed very good. It had a special sense of holiness. The design concept of the palace was also very straightforward. It was simple and elegant. To some extent, this style also reflected the style of the royal family. The Heathcliff family valued holiness as their beauty, so naturally, they did not have any fancy decorations. In the lounge of the palace, Luoya, who had just finished his tour of the palace for the first time, was drinking tea. He was thinking about the entire process of the ceremony over and over in his mind. By the way, is the saint's dagger finally going to be returned to me? The teenager muttered to himself, unconsciously touching the side of his waist. More than half a month ago, when he and Nuaire returned, although they were both unconscious, they had established a spell connection through the dagger. Bishop Philip did not dare to act rashly, so he summoned the people of the Holy Ceremonial Court. This group of people specialized in all kinds of ritual spells, and could be considered experts in this field. After that, the two were sent to the Vatican for separate treatment. Those who did not know the details of the dagger thought that it belonged to Nuaire, so it did not follow Luoya back to Akat's house. It was said that a blade was a warrior's lover. Although Luoya was not a warrior, he missed his battle partner very much. After all, the Holy One's dagger had saved his life several times in critical moments. Moreover, it was a dagger that had been opened by the Nuaire and his blood. It could be considered as a bond between the two of them. Now that it was about to be returned to its rightful owner, he was naturally happy. The main event of today's event started from the ceremony to Luoya receiving the protection of the royal family in front of everyone. After that, it was time for the banquet. There were not as many nobles in attendance as there were during the birthday banquet, because most of the nobles in the various territories had gone back home to celebrate the new year. After all, no matter how prosperous the holy capital was, they were still guests. It was not as comfortable as being the master of a territory. However, Luoya felt that this was a good thing. This time, most of the court nobles, military personnel, and knights were his own people. The atmosphere was much better than last time. Lord Luoya, the ceremony is about to begin. Please follow me. Okay. Hearing the servant's reminder, the young man nodded and was led to the entrance of the banquet hall. Stepping on the bright red carpet and looking at the beautifully decorated door, Luoya could not help but smile bitterly. He realized that he had unknowingly arrived at a very powerful place. The St. Cecil Hall was a place that, together with the large square in front of the holy capital's St. Pharaoh Cathedral, were known as the two holy places. Needless to say, the square was a place where the Vatican led people to pray every year. As for the hall in front of him, it was because of its long history and user. The St. Cecil Hall was built at the same time as the Royal Palace. It had a history of nearly 1,000 years. When the theocracy was announced, the 5 great nobles were enfeoffed in this hall. Most of the people who had walked into this hall over the past 1,000 years were heroes of their generation. Generals who had made outstanding achievements on the battlefield, ministers who had led the successful reforms, and even Pont, the ancestor who was bestowed the title of Luoya by the Queen of Wei Dualia, was here. I didn't expect that this place would be used. Luoya swallowed his saliva, and suddenly felt that something was wrong with this ceremony. At first, Luoya thought that this was just a necessary procedure because of the agreement from 1,000 years ago, just like cutting the ribbon at a construction site. But now the situation was, this was not cutting the ribbon. This was the posture of a National Day parade. Standing on the path of glory of the ancestors, Luoya was a little nervous. The old butler beside him also obviously noticed this, but unlike his usual cold and indifferent attitude towards the nobles, today the old butler of the royal family was like a spring breeze, and his face was smiling like a chrysanthemum flower. Lord Luoya, please don't be nervous. You are the youngest protagonist of the St. Cecil Hall so far. You should be proud. Wang Laoju comforted him cheerfully. As soon as the words left his mouth, not only did Luoya not feel better, but his stomach also started to hurt. He glanced at the old butler, and could not help but praise him in his heart. As expected of the butler of the royal family, this way of comforting was taught by Nuaire, right? Luoya naturally had to make up for it when he realized that he was out of the scope of the exam, and at the same time he crazily prepared himself mentally. As usual, he walked with balanced breathing first, and put on the Medal of Honor. Other than Nuaire, there were only cabbages and radishes. He did not even look at them. After making all the preparations, Luoya took a few deep breaths, and adjusted himself to the best state. As soon as he finished adjusting, the bell in the butler's hand automatically rang without any wind. After the guards heard it, they prepared to open the door. Lord Luoya, please come in. After the guards greeted him, they slowly opened the 2 arched doors that were several meters high. At the same time, the angel above the door emitted a burst of colorful light, and at the same time, pure white feathers fluttered in the air. Luoya was stunned for a moment. Colorful light? Feathers? What's going on? Am I an SSR in a random card game? The black-haired teenager was surprised by the gorgeous entrance, but he did not know that this was just the beginning. After the spacious door was opened, the bright hall was immediately filled with cheers and applause. The number of people far exceeded Luoya's expectations. Just the number of people on both sides of the carpet was estimated to be more than 100. What the hell? Is this just some nobles from the palace? Recalling the words that Prince Kai-in relayed to Kadia, Luoya was dumbfounded. There were at least 1,000 people on both sides of the carpet, right? Chapter 116. When Nuwa Air reached out her hand to stop Luoya from kneeling, Luoya was a little confused. Not kneeling in front of the king was normal in this world. After all, the king was only the head of the nobles. He didn't have absolute control over the nobles. However, it was different during the ceremony of receiving a title. It was a tradition to kneel on one knee to express respect. Don't kneel. Upon hearing Noel's words, the young man lifted his head and met the young lady's affectionate gaze. After pondering for a moment, he straightened his body. The moment he straightened his body, the crowd in the hall behind him was in an uproar. What's going on? Why did he stand up? Her Royal Highness asked him to stand up. Really? What's going on? The guests who had never seen such a scene began to discuss and speculate. Some said that it was normal for the ceremony to be different from a title. Some said that it was a change in the rules of the royal family. Some even guessed that it was an impromptu wedding. The audience was shocked, but what they didn't know was that the royal family and the staff were even more shocked. In the first row of the crowd, Prince Kane, who saw Noel's nonsense, couldn't help but turn his head and look at St. John with a frown. Father, isn't it a little inappropriate for Nuwa Air to do this? Inappropriate? What's inappropriate? The gray-haired St. John blinked his eyes when he heard Kane's words, as if he didn't understand what his son was talking about. His Royal Highness looked ahead and said, "It's really disrespectful to change the rules set by the ancestors. The process of the ceremony is messed up." Bishop John was stunned. He looked at his son as if he was looking at an idiot. His face was full of disdain. "Process my ass, your daughter is flirting with a man. Our family is here today to do this. Can't you see it? I, John, was also proud of Saint Mestre's love saint. How did I give birth to such an idiot? Granddaughters are the best. I finally understand why a prince like you is the one who chose your wife. Why did you suddenly mention this?" Kai-in, who was suddenly attacked by his father, was dumbfounded. John of the Holy See rolled his eyes and ignored him. The old man looked at the Nuwa Air in front of him and made a gesture of support. He also notified the etiquette officer. "Oh right, I remember that the covenant ceremony doesn't require kneeling, right? Let's go with that." The blonde girl in front of him breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Hardadef's order. Luoya looked at the restless crowd in the hall and couldn't help but speak. "So you didn't have a plan?" "Yeah, I just changed my mind at the last minute." Nuwa Air held his sword and smiled. He seemed to be surprised by his own actions. "It's just a kneel. I don't really mind. If you want to kneel, I welcome it when there are only two of us. But forget it in front of outsiders. I don't like people I like kneeling to me." The overly ferocious straight ball hit Luoya's heart, causing the young man's heart to beat wildly. Even his breathing was almost broken. He looked at the Nuwa Air who put down the Holy King's sword according to the etiquette officer's instructions. He couldn't help but have a unique feeling in his heart. "Your Royal Highness, the Covenant of Equality requires a token. What do you think of the short blade of the Holy King that is to be given to Luoya?" Not bad. Let's use that." Upon hearing the etiquette officer's suggestion, Nuwa Air readily agreed. The short blade of the Holy King could be said to be an opportunity for her and Luoya to get closer. It was bathed in the blood of both of them. From this point of view, it was the most appropriate token. After a burst of noise, the hall quieted down again. Under the gaze of everyone, Nuair stretched out her hand and raised the short blade in the shape of a white feather. She injected her power into it. The next moment, the short blade of the Holy King shone brightly, and a layer of halo shrouded the two of them. The Holy King had a spirit, and naturally, it would protect its master. Now that the two masters were in front of it, the short blade of the Holy King immediately became lively like a child who was reuniting with his parents. Its originally metallic blade became more and more lifelike, and the holy aura continued to spread. For a moment, it made the originally holy St. Cecil Hall look like a heavenly realm. The crowd began to scream and scream. This feeling. St. John and Prince Kai-en looked at each other. They both felt the holy aura sweep past them, and the bloodline power in their bodies began to stir. This strange feeling was obviously not the standard of a holy king, but in fact, the one who felt this feeling the most was Noel himself. Chapter 117. Ever since she developed feelings for Luoya, Nuair had been troubled by a problem. Their relationship might be a long-distance relationship. As a princess, Nuair was usually very busy. Most of her activities were in the Holy Capital and the Night Order. As the only child of the Akat family, Luoya also had to stay in his territory. Thus, there was a problem. What if someone burglarized her house when she wasn't there? As the saying goes, those who kill will always be killed. It was the same when it came to stealing. A professional crystal thief, Nuair, strictly speaking, was the one who stole the AI Lizzie. Learning from her mistakes, she didn't dare to be careless when it came to her turn. Furthermore, Nuair glanced at Luoya's face under the wings of light. She couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat. In terms of appearance, Luoya was very attractive. He even had a ridiculously beautiful adopted sister by his side. Furthermore, he didn't have much vigilance. It would be a waste if he didn't take precautions. However, it was easier said than done to take precautions. Even Nuair didn't have the confidence to generate electricity from a distance. However, she didn't expect that the skill, Afterglow of the Crown, would give her an opportunity. That's right, Nuair didn't care about the last two skills of this skill. Instead, she had a soft spot for the first skill. Due to the different perspective, the skill that she wanted the most was the one that Luoya didn't care about the least. Under the effect of Afterglow of the Crown, she could casually project an image of Luoya once every 7 days. In addition, she could also visit the Akat family when she went to the Night Order. At most, they could meet up to 5 times a month. 5 times. This was much better than meeting once every few months. As a princess, Nuair couldn't casually decide to marry him. At the very least, she had to wait until she reached adulthood. In other words, as long as she could keep an eye on him for a few years. Thinking so, the smile on Miss Angel's face deepened. On the other side, Luoya was still touched. The girl looked at this young man and suddenly felt a little guilty, but more than that, she felt a rising desire. Seriously, this expression of not doubting me at all was simply like a cute pet, making people want to pamper and bully it. Nuair's face flushed red. Naturally, she couldn't hold Luoya in her arms in front of everyone. She could only try her best to control herself. The noisy environment in the hall covered her heavy breathing, so Luoya didn't notice anything strange. Look at those two children, their wings of light. Xia, what's going on? So beautiful. The pure white sparks floated like fireflies, and the two angels with their wings of light stood in the center of the sparks. This surreal scene was undoubtedly the first time anyone had ever seen such a scene. Both the nobles and the officials understood one thing. That is, they might have witnessed an incredible scene, perhaps even historic. The crowd was excited and began to guess what had happened. Onlookers never complained about big things, let alone the live broadcast of the royal family's news. Marquis Kadia, who was in the first row of the crowd, looked at the short blade of St. John and almost guessed the reason. However, before he could think of an explanation, St. John suddenly stood up and opened his mouth to speak nonsense. Everyone, this is Xia's blessing. As soon as St. John jumped up and spoke, Kadia was stunned. Marquis Kadia stared with his eyes wide open, and found that Luoya was also stunned. In front of everyone's eyes, St. John's face didn't turn red and he didn't pant. His face was as holy as if he had been enlightened by God. He waved his hand and pointed at the two children in front of him. This is Xia's gift. The great mother goddess has recognized their oath. They are a pair blessed by Xia. This is fate and God's will. Let us bless these two children. May they always maintain their original hearts. Oh, John of the Holy See defined the two of them in just a few sentences, and it immediately caused a huge commotion. The devout believers began to kneel down in joy, and the girls who were eager to gossip began to scream. The venue was in an uproar, and everyone's emotions were stirred up. Kadia looked at the scene that was almost out of control. He could only attribute St. John's actions to increase the cohesion of the church. He glanced sideways at the silver-haired girl who hadn't said a word since she came in, and just stared at Her Royal Highness. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. If it had been anyone else spouting this nonsense, Kadia would have stood up and retorted for Elise's sake. However, the one who was spouting this nonsense was the king of St. Maester Theocracy, John of the Holy See. No one present dared to say anything. Sorry, Ai Lizzie, we'll have to bear with it for now. Kadia sighed. He could only make up his mind to help Ai Lizzie in the future. As for now, he would just treat it as the darkest night before dawn. After all, the Holy Capital was Her Royal Highness's home ground. But it would be different if they returned to Akat Hill. No matter how powerful Nua Iyer was, could he chase her all the way to her house? Kadia shook his head and laughed. He looked forward. After the ceremony was completed, the sacred music of the Holy See began to play. Chapter 118. In the noisy hall, Luoya was busy farming. However, while he was in high spirits, the silent flames of war had been ignited on the other side. On the other side of the hall, two beautiful girls were silently looking at each other. Neither of them spoke, but the cold atmosphere made the people nearby feel that something was wrong. The noble women began to exchange information. There were quite a few people who had seen Elisa at the birthday banquet. Soon, the girl's identity became known to everyone. A group of noble women and young ladies began to look at her with fiery eyes. That child is Luoya Sama's adopted sister. That is to say, lower your voice. There is no evidence yet. What evidence do we need? Look at the atmosphere over there. I'm afraid Her Highness is in trouble. The noble women and bureaucrats watched the battle excitedly from a distance, as if they were witnessing a duel between two swordsmen at the top of the Forbidden City. On the other side, Kadia glanced over and her expression changed. She hurried over to chat with John of the Holy See and the others. Ai Lizzie, if you have something to say it quickly. Time is precious. It won't be good if he sees us. Nua Iyer glanced at Luoya, who was still busy on the other side. She looked at Ai Lizzie in front of her and felt helpless. Ai Lizzie's identity had its own difficulties. It made it difficult for Luoya to perceive the difference between family and love. However, it also had its own unique advantages. For example, if anyone wanted to get close to Luoya, it would be impossible for them to fall out with Ai Lizzie. Nua Iyer didn't know if Luoya would be an exception, but she didn't want to try. It wasn't easy for her to get close to Luoya, and she didn't want to complicate things at this time. Miss Angel stared at Ai Lizzie's red eyes and felt nervous. She was afraid that this child would make things difficult, and make things too ugly. If that happened, it would be troublesome if Luoya noticed. However, it turned out that her worries were unnecessary. Greetings, Your Highness. I don't have any other intentions this time. I'm just here to greet you. It doesn't matter if my elder brother sees me. Is that so? If that's the case, then I welcome it. If our relationship is too stiff, it won't do us any good. Please be at ease. As long as Your Highness is still the power that protects Lord Big Brother, I will not unreasonably criticize you. After all, Lord Big Brother's safety is more important than anything else. I see. Upon hearing Ai Lizzie's words, Nua Iyer's expression relaxed a little. She suddenly felt that Luoya's love for her wasn't without reason. This child still knew her priorities. Luoya might seem to be safe now, but there were still many pairs of eyes watching him. For example, the secret silver monastery that wanted to kill him because of his bloodline. There were many strange organizations like this that had a grudge with the Akkad family. According to John of the Holy See, most of the awakened bloodline of the Akkad family were short-lived. Generations of awakened bloodlines all died young. This curse had undoubtedly become a sore spot for the Nua Ayar. It seems like you value him a lot. Of course I love Lord Big Brother. I can't tolerate any harm to him. The silver-haired girl covered her chest with her hand as she spoke. The expression on her face instantly melted into a smile. This warm smile was fleeting, but the irresistible charm made everyone's heart skip a beat. Before I can personally protect him, there's nothing wrong with letting you take his place. Take his place? You really dare to say that? Do you think you can surpass me in the future? Wait a minute. The blonde girl's expression changed halfway through her words. Her pair of blue eyes stared deeply at the girl in front of her. Her pupils couldn't help but flash with surprise. This feeling, she was about to reach source level 5. How was this possible? She had seen AI Lizzie at Nua Ayar's birthday party. At that time, she was still an ordinary girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. In a short 2 months, she was already about to obtain source form? A chill ran down Nua Ayar's spine and she became vigilant. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at the girl who dared to provoke her. An unprecedented sense of danger rose in her heart. When it comes to protecting Lord Big Brother, of course it's up to whoever is more qualified to do it. Am I right, Your Highness? So that's how it is. I've really been looked down upon. Nua Ayar stepped forward with a smile on her face. Although she didn't release any curse energy, her entire aura suddenly became stronger. Take my place? Hee, if you can do it, then try. I'll let you understand the difference in strength. The two of them looked at each other, the flames in their hearts silently igniting. AI Lizzie had found a target worth surpassing, while Nua Ayar felt the urgency of being chased. The two most talented girls in the theocracy had been stimulated by a single person just like that. As a result, there were 3 sets of flames in the hall. Luo Ayar's side was the most popular. Countless nobles and officials shook his hand and thanked him profusely. Nua Ayar's side was full of fighting spirit. The 2 girls refused to back down under the crowd of women. As for the third, it was Kadia. Chapter 119. Can't go back? Father, what do you mean? Luoya listened to Kadia's words, and was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he did not understand the meaning of this sentence. The murderous aura is so strong. Why does it have the smell of, I won't let you out of this door today, after the failure of a gang negotiation? What's the situation? The royal family arranged 300 axemen nearby? It doesn't make sense. Perhaps seeing Luoya's strange expression, the Marquis hurriedly added another sentence. It's work. Something happened in the military, so I probably can't go home with you. That's what I mean. So that's what you mean. Father, can you not scare me? Wait, did you just get the news? Well, Prince Kain just informed a few of our senior members of the Knights. After the banquet, the officials of the military will probably have to stay. Kadia sighed, and was obviously worried. Luoya heard this and suddenly felt that things were not good. No matter what, it was still during the banquet, and the main character was Nua Ayar at the St. Cecil Hall. Needless to say, it was even bigger than a birthday banquet. What kind of urgent matter needed to be communicated at this kind of banquet? And speaking of the military will have to stay. Luoya looked back at the number of people wearing military uniforms coming and going in the hall. There were at least 100 people. If all of them stayed, it would be too big of a commotion. Father, is it convenient to say what's the matter? Luoya asked Kadia in a low voice. The Marquis hesitated and sighed. Forget it. Anyway, you will know later. Signs of mutants have been found in the security area of Tuk Fortress. What? Mutants? Lower your voice. Before Luoya's words came out, Kadia reached out and covered his mouth. The father and son glanced around, and were relieved when they found that no one was paying attention. This is confidential military information. It hasn't been announced yet, because of fear of causing panic. Don't talk nonsense. I understand, but isn't this a little too big? Luoya swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His heartbeat sped up when he heard the news. Traces of the mutants. These few words didn't seem like much, but to those who had some military knowledge, it was like a bolt from the blue. The reason was that this wasn't like hunting. Even if you saw the traces of the mutants, you might not necessarily see them. Once you found the traces of the mutants, it was basically a prelude to war. There was a saying at the border that there were only two kinds of mutants. One was that there were none, and the other was that they were everywhere. The Great Migration at the end of the Second Era was no joke. It was a journey that was measured in years. They had to travel such a long distance before they found this paradise. Then the question was, the mutants had traveled such a long distance to the current human world. Could they be here for a vacation? Since the cost of investment was high, the desire for results was naturally high. It was the same for the mutants. Therefore, every time they discovered traces of these mutants, there was basically no peace. They would definitely try to attack the humans. Counting the years, it had been more than 80 years since the mutants last invaded the West. From a historical perspective, it was not that long ago. Why did they suddenly appear again? Luoya, calm down. Although this is a serious matter, it might not be the worst. Ka Dia patted the nervous young man's shoulder and explained the current situation from a professional's point of view. Luoya relaxed a little after hearing this. It turned out that there were many such cases in history. The two fortresses in the east of the human world would encounter such situations every few decades. However, most of the time, the mutants who came were not strong enough and were forced to retreat. The famous 4 invasions to the west were actually cases of failed defense. As long as it can be defended, it is not a big deal. The people will not know about it. This should be the case this time. Is that so? That's good. Luoya looked at Ka Dia, who was still calm, and let out a sigh of relief. As a family member of a soldier, the possible war was a small-scale defensive battle. This kind of news made him feel a lot more at ease. Well, don't worry too much. Maintain a good mood. You are the main character of this banquet. Ka Dia patted Luoya's back and urged him to quickly return. The black-haired young man's face showed a difficult expression. It's too difficult to pretend that I didn't hear about it. After sighing and adjusting for a while, Luoya squeezed out a smile on his face. He raised his head and puffed out his chest as he walked towards the Nuo Ayr. When the princess saw him, she immediately walked a few steps forward. Chapter 120. Luoya Kat was very touched. As the saying goes, a daughter is a father's little jacket. Although Luoya is not a father and is only a brother, Ai Lizzie is truly heartwarming. Caressing Ai Lizzie, who threw herself into his arms and combing her glowing silver hair with his fingers, Luoya's heart gradually calmed down. As for Ai Lizzie Kat felt that her brother was too difficult. Brother Luoya, her big brother who grew up alone, had experienced too much. His mother died when he was young, and his father could not be by his side. When he was young, his supernatural power awakened slowly, and he was once judged to have no supernatural talent. It was not easy for them to meet each other and rely on each other for warmth. However, they encountered the rude and unreasonable royal family. From that weird old man to the unreasonable princess, they all wanted to use her elder brother. What a bunch of bad people. Ai Lizzie thought angrily. It was obvious that she had a prejudice against Heathcliff. She felt that her peaceful life with Luoya gradually deviated from the path after coming to the holy capital and meeting Nuo Ayr. And now Luoya, who had experienced so much, had to face the impact of starting a new family. This cruel reality made Ai Lizzie unable to bear it. Woo! Why does this world always want to hurt brother Luoya? Under Ai Lizzie's unique filter, Luoya was already the perfect representative. Any dissatisfaction was persecution and suppression. Thinking so, the girl's eyes welled up with tears, and her little head rubbed against the boy's chest a few times. Big brother, do you think father will listen to our advice and give up? As soon as Ai Lizzie said this, Luoya was stunned. Looking at the girl's crying appearance, his heart ached, and he sighed inwardly. Yes, Elisa's father died on the battlefield. Now that she was finally able to live a peaceful life in the Akat family, She didn't expect that her adoptive father would also have to go to the battlefield. This must have stimulated her psychological shadow. The black-haired boy's expression was conflicted, but he could not give an answer that could make AI Lizzie feel at ease. It should be very difficult. After all, to a certain extent, it might be his wish. Thinking of Kadia, who was so focused on his career that he even neglected his territory, Luoya could not help but rub his eyebrows. Not to mention his father's dedication to his job, Roja didn't think that Kadia was the kind of person who would cower in the face of a war with the aliens. Soldiers, especially soldiers who defended their country, were mostly unyielding and courageous. Seeing their comrades die on the battlefield, the first reaction of many of them was not to retreat, but to seek revenge. Seeing that the situation at the front was not good, many of them did not panic, but chose to go to the battlefield personally. Asking Kadia to retreat at this time was simply a fool's dream, and it would also damage his reputation. Sometimes, nobles even valued their reputation more than their lives. As a son, Luoya naturally could not do anything that would ruin his father's reputation. But I think it's wrong to completely ignore our children. We should at least listen to your opinion on this matter. AI Lizzie was still trying her best with tears in her eyes. No matter what, she could not ignore Luoya, who was part of the family when it came to reorganizing the family. Furthermore, Luoya was the only child. If Kadia remarried and had the intention of having a second child, then Luoya's advantage as an only child would disappear. Losing the identity of an only child, Kadia being deceived by a vixen, Luoya losing the right to inherit the family. This long series of plot lines formed in AI Lizzie's mind in just a few seconds, and it made her even more uneasy. I must not let something like this happen to Big Brother. AI Lizzie clenched her small fists as she thought so, and her entire person became resolute. Big Brother, if it's not convenient for you to say it, then how about I do it? You do it? Yes, leave it to me to make father change his mind. The silver-haired girl looked resolutely at Luoya's golden eyes. Luoya blinked and could not help but ponder. Wait, if AI Lizzie were to say it, the effect would be better than if I were to say it. After all, Kadia was her guardian, and he promised to take good care of her. Although it was impossible to make Kadia completely give up on the idea of going to the battlefield, even if he could only retreat to the second line of logistics, it would be much better than going to the eastern border and starving. Thinking of this, Luoya nodded slightly, and his eyes gradually brightened. AI Lizzie, then I'll leave this matter to you. Don't worry, do it boldly. Whether it succeeds or not, I won't blame you. Yes, I understand. AI Lizzie clenched her fists, feeling that she had understood the essence of the matter. Luoya's eyes also lit up, and it was obvious that he had high hopes for her. In this situation of mutual trust, the two finished their dinner and began to read in the study while waiting for Kadia to return home. Chapter 121. On the second day after Luoya was granted the position of acting overlord, Kadia left. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses are mobilized, the army's supply line has always been the most important part of military operations. Although the route used to send supplies to the eastern Tark fortress was still there, it was only suitable for the current situation. After the appearance of the mutants, according to the agreement, the various countries would increase the number of troops to defend the area they were in charge of. It was inevitable that the population of the eastern border would skyrocket. Under such circumstances, the daily transportation volume would increase by more than 10 times. Simply put, after a few decades, the human countries needed to build roads again, and this road was quite long. But fortunately, there was a foundation left behind before, so strictly speaking, it was only building roads. This task undoubtedly fell on the head of the logistics department. As the head of the logistics department, Kadia had to personally go to the site to inspect, and was also the first batch of soldiers to leave the army. After waving goodbye to Kadia at the door in the morning, Luoya looked at his father and the soldiers who left with a serious face and sighed. Although Luoya had discussed the issue of the territory with Kadia several times, he had never thought of being an acting overlord. In the end, managing a department and managing all the departments were two completely different concepts. and the many complicated matters were enough to give him a headache. But fortunately, Dia still had a sense of law. Yesterday, he had drafted a power of attorney and had the palace notarize it overnight. As long as there was this thing, Luoya wouldn't be considered as taking up the post without a certificate. But in the entire theocracy, there weren't many people who dared to investigate him, so this thing was at most icing on the cake. After Dia left, Luoya and Ai Lizi also began to prepare to return to the territory. Thinking of this, Luoya felt very convinced. It had been almost 3 months since Nuwa Ayer's birthday party last year, and Akate territory had been idling without anyone, but everything was still as usual, as expected of an ancestor who had thrown his responsibilities to the wind. He had completely turned into a feudal lord. For the entire day, Luoya and Ai Lizi were thinking about what to bring and what to purchase. After all, the Saint capital was the most prosperous place in Saint Mestre, and there were some things that couldn't be bought elsewhere. Usually, nobles would greet their friends before leaving and even meet up with them. However, Luoya and Ai Lizi didn't need to do so. At most, they would send someone to inform the palace. Then before noon, the person who informed them came back. However, he didn't come back on his own. Instead, he came back with a large number of guards and the royal family's carriage. Alright, to a certain extent, Luoya had already guessed that this might be the case, so she wasn't too surprised. Ai Lizi's little face, on the other hand, puffed up. But as a noble, she knew that it was a friendly gesture for her to pay a visit before she left, so she could only pinch her nose and acquiesce to the vixen's arrival. If that's the case, are you leaving tomorrow? In the living room, Nuwa Ayer looked at the siblings sitting opposite her and sighed. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with Luoya. However, Ai Lizi was also an interesting person. As a competitor, she felt a sense of crisis. If the conditions allowed, Nuwa Ayer would like to compete with this child. Losing both her lover and her competitor meant that the life of the princess would once again become dull and dull. To be honest, Nuwa Ayer wasn't too happy. However, she also knew how important a territory was to a noble, so naturally, she couldn't say anything to dissuade them. Of course, this was because Nuwa Ayer didn't know about the great achievements of the Akate territory's governance. She didn't know that there was such a big noble family in the world who didn't care about anything. Otherwise, she might have really made them stay for another 2 months. You should already know about the military situation, right? The mutants? Yes, I heard from my father. Uncle Dia should have already left, right? He left early this morning. I am now the acting lord, so it is reasonable for me to return to the territory as soon as possible. Nuwa Ayer understood Luoya's answer. However, after glancing at Ai Lizi, Miss Angel decisively stated her request. You can go back, but you have to write to me. Write to me. Yes, I am your protector. It is my duty to understand your situation. Let me think, 1 letter a week. Nuwa Ayer smiled and said the communication frequency, which immediately caused Ai Lizi to be dissatisfied. Your Highness, not to mention how useful writing letters can be in protecting Brother Luoya. 1 letter a week is too frequent, right? Brother is busy as the acting lord. I don't think it is good to add to his burden. I don't think it is a burden to write to me. In fact, this is the first time I have asked someone to write to me. Luoya, do you hate it? No, I don't mean that. Facing the princess who looked as if her pride was hurt, Luoya hurriedly waved her hand to deny it. Nuwa Ayer smirked and once again confronted Ai Lizi. Miss Ai Lizi, although you are Luoya's adopted sister, that doesn't mean you can represent him. Who knows, maybe the things you hate are the things he likes the most. Hehe, your highness really knows how to joke. I know brother very well, more than anyone else. Sometimes it is the other person's wishful thinking. Luoya looked at the two who were staring at each other without backing down. She silently lowered her head and turned into a stone statue. She followed the three-nose principle of not speaking, not moving, and not looking. Chapter 122. 1 day later, in the evening. In front of the convoy with the Akate family emblem, there was chaos at this time. On the plains outside the official road, A group of strange animals were running across the official road. It was a kind of four-legged animal similar to a sheep with two horns on its head. Its fur was white with gold, and its cry was a bit like a deer. It was very flexible when it ran. Its name was Golden Lamb. It was a famous monster that represented luck in Wuxia. It was also an animal whose whole body was priceless. Although Golden Lamb had gold in its name, there was actually no gold in its shining wool. The gold referred to its value after being sold. The fur of a golden lamb was equivalent to a gold coin of the same weight. This was a famous illusion in the past. Needless to say, the ornamental value of the golden wool had always been the highest level raw material for luxurious clothes of the noblewomen. It had always been in short supply. Saint Mestre was still fine. In the Austin Empire, people believed that wearing clothes made of golden wool would bring good luck. Clothes with a little golden wool were more than twice as expensive as other clothes. In addition to the wool, the horn of the golden lamb was also a rare curse material. Its head could be used as an ornament, and its meat was famous for being delicious. It had always been in the top 3 in the rankings of famous chefs, but it was not easy to catch. In short, it was a treasure. Such an animal suddenly passed by in front of people. In the eyes of people, it was almost the same as a pile of gold coins jumping there. Luoya knew the moment he saw the golden lamb that the opportunity had come. The black-haired boy looked at the soldiers who were ready to move, but restrained because of discipline. He knew that the time to show his leadership and strength had come. He opened the door and looked into the distance, then he ordered loudly, "Captain, come out." After the order was issued, the Akat military officer and the captain of the royal guards walked out of the crowd. Under Luoya's inquiry, they explained the characteristics of this monster in a few words. It turned out that one of the main reasons why these golden lambs were not easy to catch was because their wool was very unique. It was fine for slashing and cutting, but it was extremely resistant to arrows and piercing damage. It was almost impossible to kill it. If one wanted to kill it, they would have to chase after it and hack it to death. Their combat strength was not very high, and a source rank 6 would be able to take down one by themselves. As soon as Luoya heard that they needed to chase after the sheep, he immediately mounted his horse. Under the golden afterglow of the setting sun, a group of armored soldiers began to chase after the sheep. Unfortunately, the speed of a horse carrying a person was not great. They chased after the sheep all the way to the edge of the forest, but they still could not catch up. The soldiers could not help but become anxious. It was fine if they didn't see it, but even if they did, how could they let these gold coins and good ingredients run away? The commander of the Akat private army, Duke, was anxious. He was already considering whether or not to dismount and try to chase after the sheep. After all, Duke was a source rank 4. Not to mention the long distance, it was still very easy for him to sprint faster than a horse. However, before the commander of the army could make up his mind, the running people found something strange. A powerful spell suddenly appeared in the team. When the soldiers felt it, they turned around and saw the young master Luoya, who they were supposed to protect, flying over their heads like a cannonball. At this time, Luoya's body was wrapped in white light. He held a silver blade in his hand, and a pair of wings of light appeared on his shoulders. After soaring into the sky and flying at high speed for a while, the black-haired young man fell to the ground like a meteor. With a loud bang, he smashed into the edge of the forest in front of the golden lambs. In the smoke screen, a terrifying aura rolled out, and a huge and terrifying shadow suddenly appeared in the sky where the light and darkness met. At this moment, the running golden lambs stopped as if they were collectively immobilized. They trembled under the gaze of the shadow. Those who were in a better state curled up on the ground, and those who weren't in a good state directly fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Of course, this powerful deterrence didn't only affect the monsters. The horses of the knights also stopped at the same time. There was a burst of people shouting and horses neighing, and some even began to run back in fright. "Not good, we accidentally hurt our allies." "That's enough, Gulandair." "Well, these little things really can't be scared." Glancing at the knights who were in a hurry in the distance, the shadow of the Gulandair finally faded away. The huge skeleton didn't leave. It began to look at the soldiers and Luoya, and began to talk about the animals of his time. Although the horses of my time weren't big, they were all quite good-looking. They could even grow horns on their heads. They were much better than these. Big brother, you're talking about unicorns, right? Luoya rubbed his chin as he listened to the words of the Gulandayer. He felt that there were only two possibilities for a horse that wasn't afraid of a giant. It was either the king of horses or the retard of horses. The black-haired young man listened to the rambling of the lonely giant. On the other hand, the soldiers on the other side were terrified. The pressure of the Gulandayer was too strong. Not to mention these animals, even humans would have a great deal of fear. And the deeper one's understanding of supernatural power, the more they would feel the terror. The commander of the Akit private army, Duke, took 2 deep breaths. He looked at the pale faces of the royal guards and realized that their young master wasn't simple. The soldiers didn't understand the terrifying aura just now, but they could see further. That was an ancient existence that was difficult to understand and approach. It was a monster that made them unable to even think of resisting. Duke didn't know how Luoya controlled such an existence, but there was no doubt that this was an unimaginably strong force. Even the current Marquis Kadia didn't make Duke feel so powerless. Luoya, as the future heir of the territory, was able to reach such a level at such a young age. This future achievement. Thinking until here, Duke reacted. He looked at Luoya, who reappeared in the smoke, and hurriedly ordered the stiff soldiers. What are you waiting for? It's rare for the young master to make a move personally. Hurry up and catch the sheep. Yes, yes. Chapter 123. Under a hill beside the official road, Duke and the others were setting up camp. Because of the last-minute hunt, the speed of Luoya's convoy was greatly slowed down. If they wanted to get to the town to rest, they would have to march through the night. For the Akot private army and palace guards who prioritized the safety of Luoya and Ai Lizi, this was too risky. Being ambushed at night was no joke. Many important people had failed miserably at night. Even if Duke had full confidence in his subordinates and palace guards, he didn't want to take unnecessary risks. Also, the current atmosphere wasn't suitable for marching. How many sheep are we going to kill? There are so many of us. We can't possibly eat all of them, right? Originally, the chefs wanted to kill 3, but the young master said that it wasn't enough to reward the whole army, so he added 2 more. Really? Shia bless Lord Luoya. A few soldiers who were skillfully building the barracks chatted happily, looking forward to the delicious food in the story. This was also the current atmosphere of the entire camp. The excited soldiers had smiles on their faces. The campfire was being prepared. The servants were preparing chairs for Luoya and Ai Lizi, and the chefs were working hard to harvest the wool of the golden lambs that were already slaughtered by the soldiers. Brother Luoya, the wool of these sheep is very precious. Should we try to raise them? We can't do that. I've asked. After the golden lambs lose their wool, they will sense danger and speed up the process of mutation. Soon after, they will turn into a ferocious fawn. At that time, not only will they have no wool, their meat will also become hard. I see, no wonder the golden wool is so rare. It turns out that each sheep can only be harvested once. Yes, our hunt this time can be considered to have removed the hidden danger of monsters nearby. Otherwise, it would be difficult to deal with these sheep when they grow up. Luoya looked at the worker who was harvesting the sheep's wool. He felt that he had really gained both fame and fortune. Ai Lizi nodded her little head, and looked at the young man beside her thoughtfully. Luoya and the others had chased after them for a long distance, so Ai Lizi didn't sense the power of the Gulandayer. However, this didn't mean that she didn't notice anything strange. Ai Lizi saw the reverence in the eyes of the returning soldiers, Duke's warm attitude, and the subservient attitude of the palace guards. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. He heard that these sheep were stopped by Brother Luoya. It seemed that Brother Luoya had become a lot stronger recently. Ai Lizi thought back to a few months ago. At that time, Luoya was only at source grade 6. It was impossible for him to be admired by this group of elite soldiers above source grade 5. Brother Luoya never told me about supernatural powers. Ai Lizi thought about this inside. Because she hid the fact that she cultivated supernatural powers, Luoya had always treated her as a weak and ordinary girl. Although this allowed her to enjoy her brother's love, it also made it difficult for AI Lizzie to recognize Luoya's strength. He shouldn't be at source grade 4, right? AI Lizzie thought with a little guilty conscience. She already knew that Duke was at source grade 4 from Kadia. This military officer was serious and valued strength the most. Now that Duke was acting so respectfully, perhaps Luoya really was. AI Lizzie started to think that other people's supernatural powers were rising at the same speed as her own. She started to make baseless guesses and felt that she was too lazy. No. I still have to work hard. The silver-haired girl clenched her small fist. She was determined to protect Luoya. She felt that she had to catch up to her brother's footsteps. Moreover, considering Nua Ire, the situation was even more urgent. AI Lizzie's journey of cheating sped up again. Luoya was watching the Akit family's chef's work. Of the 5 lambs that were slaughtered on the spot, 4 were roasted whole lambs, and the caramel reaction was used to produce the most delicious taste. The remaining 1 was used to stew soup with the mountain delicacies that the soldiers collected from nearby. The soldiers who were given the task of collecting the herbs had high morale. They had been outside for many years and were very clear about which wild plants were edible and which were tasty. They dug around in the forest and dug out many good things. Luoya looked at the mountain of mountain herbs and felt that Akit should develop this area. For example, in his previous life, Luoya's White Mountain, Old Ginseng was a key area for a period of time. While Luoya, who saw everything as gold coins, was thinking, the other side had already started cooking. Not long after the 4 golden lambs were placed on the fire, a thick fragrance began to spread in the camp. Duke saw this and hurriedly increased the number of soldiers on duty, worried that the delicious food would attract wild beasts. After a busy period, the sun had completely set and the celebration feast began. Luoya and AI Lizzie enjoyed 1 golden lamb alone. The other 3 were left for the soldiers and officers in the camp. But in reality, with Luoya and AI Lizzie's appetite, they could only eat a few pieces of meat cut from the good parts. The rest would be given to the soldiers. Roasted whole lamb was not a delicate dish. The secret of the delicious taste was the quality of the ingredients. The golden lamb could be said to be the best in this aspect. The fat was evenly distributed, the meat was juicy, and the texture melted in the mouth. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. When eating, one had to look at the food and the atmosphere. Although the environment in the wilderness was not elegant enough, the smoke rising from the plains had a unique charm. The sound of laughter echoed in the ears. It was different from the exquisite banquets of the nobles, but it had a free and happy atmosphere. "Brother, don't you need some wine to relieve your boredom?" "No, no one drinks. I am no exception." Chapter 124. Someone from Sorophia is here, and we need to inform him? Beside the campfire, Luoya looked at the confused Duke, his small eyes filled with doubt. What's going on? Why would Sorophia suddenly appear? And to inform him once someone arrives, could it be, Kadia also took out loans when he was young? Saint Mestre's king of moneylenders, Luoya, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't that Luoya was maliciously speculating about his father, but there were too many nobles who did this. Developing a territory usually required a large amount of funds, and the amount would depend on the scale of the development. However, it was obvious that most of the nobles wouldn't pay the full amount out of their own pockets. It was just like buying a house. There were people who paid the full amount, but that was only because they were rich and overbearing. Most of them would pay the down payment first, and then slowly work their way up. In Luoya's previous life, the financial institution was a bank, but in this world it was a merchant association. Generally speaking, before developing a territory, the feudal lord would contact the local merchant association, and the merchant association would set the interest rate and pay a portion of the money. The territory would pay a portion of the money back every year, and it would take a few years or even a few decades to pay off the debt. Of course, this was only the simplest model. In reality, there were many things that could be discussed during the negotiations. For example, most feudal lords wanted the merchant association to be in charge of the logistics of the development of the territory. The nobles didn't know where the most durable tools were, so the merchant association had to send out experienced merchants to purchase them. The merchant association would also accept missions in exchange for some benefits and convenience, turning into a red-top merchant for a while. Generally speaking, developing a territory together with the merchant association was a mutually beneficial matter. However, as the saying goes, the greater the profit, the greater the risk. If the development failed, it would be a heavy blow to the noble family and the merchant association. As the largest merchant association in Xia, the Sorofia Merchant Association had developed countless territories together with the local feudal lords. Of course, there were some that succeeded, but there were a few that failed, and the feudal lords owed Sorofia a huge debt. Could it be that his father had done some development when he was young, or that one of his ancestors had done some work and owed money to Sorofia, the head of the capitalists, and was now being asked to repay the debt? Luoya's face turned green when he thought of this possibility. Damn it, he had already shouldered a debt of 500,000 yuan. If he had to repay his father's debt, then Luoya might as well sell himself to Nua Ire as a pet. Did our territory engage in any large-scale development projects in the past? The black-haired young man carefully asked Duke. The middle-aged man blinked his eyes and smiled, which was a rare sight. Ha ha ha, young master, look at what you're saying. We are Akat territory. How could we possibly engage in territorial development? What the hell? You're quite proud, aren't you? Luoya looked at Duke, who had an expression that said, "Young master, you're thinking too much." He suddenly felt that his ancestors were really something else. They could actually cultivate the pride of not developing their territory. How the hell did they do it? The young man rubbed his temples as he thought of this. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake for Heathcliff to give so much land to the Akat family 1,000 years ago. Perhaps the royal family didn't expect this at that time. The Akat family had generations of ambitious young men who would rather die than inherit their family's billions of assets. After generations, the billions of assets were about to grow, and the Akat family was still keen on fighting. After silently complaining in his heart for a while, Luoya finally felt relieved. There shouldn't be any money owed to Sorofia. Then it's fine. Although Sorofia was powerful, the Akat family wasn't bad either. The 5 grass-head kings of the theocracy weren't just for show. Sorofia might be a strong dragon in other places, but in Akat territory, he really couldn't beat the local snake. Thinking of this, Luoya's confidence swelled. He was most afraid that he was in the wrong. As long as he didn't sign any contract with Sorofia, Luoya could ignore them. Besides, Luoya had sold them a high-quality requiem lamp before. Strictly speaking, he had formed a good relationship with Sorofia, so he should be thanking him. But speaking of Sorofia, I remember that in the game. The black-haired young man whispered in a low voice, and the figure of a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils appeared in his mind. Xia Luot Sorofia, the eldest daughter of the Sorofia family, and also one of the 4 female protagonists of the game, Eye of the Recorder. Luoya's memory of the game was a bit blurry, and he didn't have much impression of this woman. He only remembered that she was a cold beauty. Xia Luot's coldness was different from Ai Lizi's. Ai Lizi's coldness was a kind of cold and arrogant temperament, while Xia Luot's coldness was her attitude towards people. She wasn't exactly a 3-nothingness, and it wasn't the kind of coldness that was targeted at someone. Instead, it was a natural personality that kept people at arm's length. In other words, Charlotte was a girl who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The Sorofia family had a strange personality that seemed to be inherited from their family. They were especially stubborn, and they clearly distinguished between love and hate. This could be seen from their family history. As long as it was something they hated, even if it was a colossus like the Austin Empire, they would fight to the death. But if it was something they liked or loved, then they would show extraordinary friendliness. Xia Luot could be said to have a typical family personality. She wouldn't hesitate to use any means to suppress those she hated, but she was willing to give up almost anything for those she liked. To be honest, Luoya didn't want to have any contact with this woman. The main reason was that Luoya didn't dare to guarantee that he could break through her hard shell and enter her heart. If that happened, it would be too difficult for him to turn things around. On the other hand, among the 4 female protagonists who ganged up on Luoya in the game, Xia Luo did the least. She didn't even make a move. Luoya didn't know why, but from this fact, the conflict between the two didn't seem to be that big. So it was fine to leave her alone. Forget it, I'll just ignore her. Anyway, she doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. I'm very busy. Elder brother, what have you been talking about since the beginning? Chapter 125. 1 month later, Akat territory. Early in the morning, a beautifully decorated carriage slowly came from the end of the street. The logo on the carriage was somewhat unique. It was a strange pattern of an eye above a candle flame. If it was in a foreign country, it would probably be regarded as the symbol of a cult. However, in Akat territory, this symbol was already known to everyone. At least in this month, its popularity had greatly increased. Of course, along with the candle flame symbol, there was another name, Luoya in Akat. The current acting lord of Akat territory, the young master of the Marquis Mansion. For some unknown reason, he completely grasped the power of the territory, and was now the #1 person in the Akat territory's government. It was admittedly good to have so many resounding titles, but when these titles were placed on the head of a 10-year-old child, the world's doubts would fill the sky and earth. Even though many officials didn't say anything, they still had some objections to Marquis Kadia's decision. One must know that Marquis Kadia was a well-known figure in the theocracy. No matter where he went, his name was well known. Although he was a little weak in governing the territory, he was still a big tree. Under the big tree, it was cool to enjoy the shade. The resistance to change and the nostalgia to beautify the past could be said to be a common human behavior. When Luoya first took office, his support among the people was actually quite low. However, no one expected that this situation would quickly change in just a short month. The carriage wheels turned and arrived at the entrance of the territory's government office. The door opened, the coachman placed the ladder, and the beautiful maid got off the carriage first and stood respectfully by the side. This scene had become a daily routine for the nearby residents in the past month, and it also became the focus of everyone's attention. When the black-haired youth's figure walked out of the carriage, and the moment his handsome and tender cheeks appeared, many passers-by stopped to look. The young girls who saw Luoya for the first time let out a short cry, and the women living nearby couldn't help but take a few more glances. Oh, he's so good-looking. This was what most people were thinking at this moment. As he grew older, Luoya's achievements in the field of facial recognition were getting higher and higher. There were almost no flaws in his image, and humans were creatures that were dominated by vision to a certain extent. Luoya's popularity soared like a rocket as the number of times she appeared in public increased. Every evening, more and more young girls pretended to pass by on the streets. Some of them even rented houses nearby. Luoya was actually quite helpless against these users who only cared about appearances. These groups of fans reminded him of some bad things from his previous life. Fortunately, these people were more rational. Come to think of it, Nuair seemed to be in the same situation as well. In fact, it was even more serious than Luoya. After all, the royal family had always been the center of gossip, be it in the previous life or the present. Thinking of this, Luoya felt a little more comfortable. After getting off the carriage, he looked around. Many people around him saluted him, and Luoya nodded his head in greeting. As it turned out, Luoya could rely on his face to make a living. However, how could he, who had great ambitions to clean up the mess left by his ancestors, do that? A lot of debt constantly urged him to improve, telling him that if he wanted to make a living, he had to rely on his talent. A month ago, when Luoya took over the power of the territory, the first thing he thought about was how to unite the people. During the transition between the old and the new, the officials lacked a sense of identity with the new leader. The civilians didn't care about politics and didn't know about the new leader. This was a very common phenomenon before the mass media coverage. Luoya's situation was especially serious because of his age. Expanding his influence became his priority, and he had to do it quickly. Speed was the most important thing in war. At such a critical moment, Luoya naturally couldn't be careless. Without saying a word, he took out 3 axes. The first one was to rectify the law and order. Although the Achaite territory had the best law and order among the 5 noble families, it was actually referring to the overall environment. Most of the judgments were based on the number of bandits in the territory, whether the roads were smooth and safe, and other factors that were beneficial to the merchants. However, for the citizens of Achaite City, some of the evildoers were more harmful to their lives. Petty thieves, ruffians, gangsters, loan sharks, and even human traffickers. These were the mountains that pressed down on the citizens. They often had a negative or even irreversible impact on their normal lives. Luoya, who had seen a lot of these evil forces in his previous life, hated them to the core. He was determined not to allow such vermin to run rampant in his territory. Thus, the slogan "Eliminate Evil," which had never appeared in the theocracy before, was launched with Luoya's strong support. Luoya carefully selected the law enforcement officers. Luoya didn't touch the city guards and the militia. On one hand, he was afraid that they would collude with the local evil forces. On the other hand, he was worried that they weren't strong enough. Luoya, who had seen a lot of extraordinaries, had a little side effect recently. He estimated the strength of his opponents as high as possible. In addition, this was a special period, so he was really cautious to the extreme. Under such guidance, Luoya only had one choice left. That was the most loyal people, the Achaite private army and the palace guards who would escort him. Thus, Duke, who was at source grade 4, personally took the lead. All of them were at source grade 5. As a local, Duke's sources of information were too wide. The first time he worked for Luoya, he was even more enthusiastic. In less than a week, he sent over a list of 100 people. The crimes on the list were roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category was people who committed murder and human traffickers. The second category was people who hurt people and indirectly caused the destruction of people's families. The third category was people who robbed, extorted, stole, and fled the city. For this list, Luoya first demanded that the evidence must be conclusive. He couldn't be biased. After ensuring that the list was correct, he immediately ordered a heavy strike. First of all, the human traffickers had to be killed, especially those who abducted children. Luoya's guidelines for these kinds of criminals were to hang them all. Not a single one was left alive. Logically speaking, the prison wasn't a place where just any trash could live. In any case, it was taxpayers' money. Some of the more vicious criminals were directly sent to Wuxia. As a grass-headed emperor, every lord had the right to change the laws in their territory. Before Luoya took action, he specifically changed the laws in this area. These evil forces would be dealt with severely. He was determined not to let them cause any more harm to the victims or retaliate against the informants. Under such a thunderous method, in just a short period of 10 days, the major gangs in Achaite City were all toppled. The loan sharks were arrested while fleeing, and the human traffickers were all caught. One after another, the hidden criminals were so scared that they lined up to surrender. They were afraid that they would be killed by Duke's troops. That's right, because Duke's troops were all youths from the military. Most of them had a strong sense of justice and a strong murderous aura. In addition to Luoya's orders, this group of source grade 5 enforcers would often be filled with righteous indignation when they saw criminals in the middle of a crime. Some of them were even killed on the spot. It had to be said that although these killing gods didn't follow the rules, the deterrence effect was too strong. Now, when the ruffians on the street saw the Achaite family's military uniform, their legs would go soft and they would tremble. Those who were timid would easily pee their pants. Chapter 126. So back to the old question. How do you gather the people's hearts? There was a saying in ancient times that whoever wins the hearts of the people wins the world. So for this difficult question, Luoya actually cheated. He had a wealth of knowledge that was different from this era. Putting aside the thousands of years of history of the Celestial Empire, Luoya, who was illuminated by the Red Star in his previous life, was very familiar with the topic of uniting the people. How to unite? To serve the people. The eyes of the people were bright. Whether a lord was good or bad, mediocre or incompetent, they could see all of these. Luoya was born a noble in this life, so it was impossible for him to walk among the people, but it was still possible for him to walk among the people. Although the special campaign against evil was a loss, and the Akat family even paid a sum of money to compensate the victims, it was in exchange for prestige and the people's hearts, which were difficult to buy with money. On the other hand, it also united Luoya's team. During the campaign, the finance department, the publicity department, and the special task force worked closely together. These officials who originally served Kadia were gradually familiar with Luoya, and they also had a preliminary sense of honor. Duke was very happy during the celebration. He was happy not only because he completed the mission, but also because he had the honor of upholding justice for the village. He gained a good reputation, and he was proud to work under Luoya. The same was true for the young people in the team. These people were loved by the people, and this was reflected in many aspects. Perhaps it was because they didn't need to pay for groceries, or perhaps it was because they were respected on the streets, but more than that, they were confessed to. That's right, this team quickly got rid of their single status in the process of serving the people. Some of them were even heroes saving beauties, and as their boss, Luoya, naturally didn't escape. He wasn't only watched by young girls, but in fact the government building received more than 10 confession letters every day. And there were even daughters of officials who wanted to be his concubine. Of course, these requests were all rejected by Luoya with the reason that Kadia wasn't here. Luoya strolled into the Akat territory's government mansion and entered the lord's room. Leaning on the soft leather chair, he looked out of the window and sighed in relief. The first of the three-pronged policies was undoubtedly very effective and could be considered a good start. After that, Luoya's second and third-pronged policies followed. The Akat Territory Road Preparation Plan was a project that Luoya and the relevant staff had worked out over a period of several years. The goal was to open up the various villages and towns in Akat Territory and build a transportation network, thus laying the foundation for future development. To put it bluntly, it was infrastructure. If you want to get rich, you have to build roads first. This sentence was sufficient proof of the importance that the Celestial Empire placed on infrastructure. Luoya, as an upright citizen of the Celestial Empire in his previous life, could be said to have been greatly affected. How could he talk about development if he couldn't even take a proper path? One must know that whether it was military or commercial operations, a good road was the main prerequisite. The last road preparation in Akat territory was a few decades ago when Kadia just took office. Now it had been in disrepair for a long time, and some places were impassable due to the rolling rocks. Of course, even though building roads was good, it was a huge project that required a lot of investment. Originally, Luoya wanted to seek financing from the Chamber of Commerce, but after looking at the pile of debt in his system, Luoya decided to leave a path for himself in the future. When he started, he would borrow as little as possible. In fact, even without the Chamber of Commerce, Luoya could do it alone because he could save a lot of money. Milton's Path of Nature. Forrest Ferry Milton's research on the combination of nature and civilization. After cutting wood, it can produce wooden bricks that are as strong as rocks. When buried in the ground, they will take root and sprout. The wood elves still exist, but in a different way. Milton's Sessions. Price, 30,000 points / stick, Acting Lord Memorial Event. 1,000 years of accumulation will give birth to precious wealth. 1,000 years of neglect will cause the territory to stagnate. Only wealth and prosperity can resist the butcher's knife of the enemy. 50% off. Milton's Path of Nature. Price, 10,000 points / stick. When Luoya saw the discounted items in the event area, it could be said that he instantly listed Milton's Path of Nature as a must-buy. All the other daily necessities paled in comparison. In ancient times, the cost of road construction was mainly concentrated in two aspects. One was manpower, which was unavoidable, and the other was the cost of the road itself. There were several types of roads. The worst wild road only needed to be compacted, but it was prone to weeds. Slightly better roads required soil frying. Better stone roads required large amounts of raw stones to be cut. On the other hand, brick roads required a higher cost because they needed to be refined and transported in a unified manner. The basic cost of refining the bricks, the fuel consumed during the firing, and the transportation after the firing. All of these added up to a huge sum of money. But with Milton's path of nature, all these could be saved. This item with a strange name was actually a set of tools that was enchanted with the forest fairy's exclusive curse. When wood was placed into the tool, it would produce wooden blocks that would increase in hardness. After being buried in the ground, it would take root like a tree. It was simply a divine tool for infrastructure in the mountainous forests. When Luoya first saw this item, he had doubts. What if it caught fire? But after testing it, Luoya realized that he was overthinking. This Milton's path of nature absorbed water and released water when it was on fire. It was harder to ignite than ordinary roads. Chapter 127. 2 years later. Rose Commercial United Nations, Rose City. In a classic office, a brown-haired middle-aged man sat behind a desk. In the middle of the room stood a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils. The man's name was Brosnan, and the girl's name was Xia Luot. The two of them were the most famous father and daughter in the entire Rose. Everyone knew about their deep relationship. But now the atmosphere in the room was different from usual. It was full of strangeness. "Father, why did you call me here all of a sudden?" The brown-haired girl sitting in front of the desk stared at the man in front of her curiously. She didn't know what was wrong with her usually resolute father. Xia Luot was puzzled because she was called back from the fringe by Brosnan using an urgent family letter. Normally, such a letter meant that something big had happened in the family. But when Xia Luot finally got home, Brosnan only asked about some trivial matters. It had been more than half an hour since then. Faced with Xia Luot's question, the middle-aged man sighed slightly. He recalled his daughter's marriage contract and rubbed his hands nervously. He felt that he should take things one step at a time. Ahem. Xia Luot, what do you think of the Akat family? Akat family? Are you talking about the Akat dominion that borders us? If it's Akat territory, it's a place with potential, but the lord there has always been incompetent. The brown-haired girl's vicious comments made Brosnan's eyebrows twitch. Then, the long list of data that the girl listed made him speechless. The territory's development rate was estimated to be less than 40%. The roads were broken, the transportation in the mountains was inconvenient, and the border tariffs were always at the bottom. Sometimes it wasn't even enough to cover the cost of the border checkpoint. It was simply a miracle. All right. I know what you think of the Akat dominion. You don't have to say anything more. Brian waved his hand to stop Xia Luot's business analysis. He felt that he had dug a hole for himself, so he didn't know what to say. The Sorofia family was a business family. Although they had gone to war, the tradition of doing business in the family had not changed. Sitting in the commercial center of Rose, they built their country on economics. When they looked at others, their focus would naturally be on economics and statistics. The Akat family, as a neighbor whose valuation was always high but whose output was always at the bottom, naturally didn't have a good reputation among the Sorofia people. However, as the head of the family, Bruce didn't think so at all. From a merchant's point of view, Akat Hill was not good, but in terms of supernatural power and military, it was very good. After all, there was no such thing as a perfect territory. Lo She developed his business, which was why he was prosperous, but Akat chose military force, which was why it was stable. From the perspective of a ruler, Bruce had a very high opinion of Akat. At least, Akat was a good neighbor worth maintaining a close relationship with. As for Xia Luot's point of view, Bruce happened to have some material to refute. Xia Luot, do you know Luoya Akat? Luoya Akat. Oh, he's the only son of the current Marquis Kadia Akat. I heard that he was very naughty when he was young. Later on, he seemed to have a good relationship with the Nuwa Iyer princess of the theocracy. Ahem. Let's not talk about his past or who he is backing. You have been busy with the fringe for the past 2 years, so the news is a little outdated. Take a look at this first, Bruce said as he handed the document to Xia Luot. The brown-haired girl took the document and read it carefully. Gradually her eyes widened. The middle-aged man looked at the girl's reaction, which was almost the same as when he first saw the document. Indeed, the contents of this research report from Akate Territory's Sorofia branch could be said to be explosive. The various data in it were somewhat unimaginable, to the point that Bruce had to send someone to investigate it and reconfirm its authenticity. The tariff increase is 150%? How is that possible? Xia Luo began to concentrate on the report. She carefully read the policies of Akat Hill for the past 2 years. The more she read, the more she felt that the policies were ingenious. First, there was a never-before-heard action called Clean Up the Evil. The powerful military force was used to wipe out all the evil spirits in the territory. After that, there was a large-scale road construction that completely opened up the transportation network. After that, there was a cleanup of the city to raise the evaluation of the investors who came to inspect the city. Finally, there was a series of measures to encourage trade, and a strange policy called poverty alleviation. The poverty alleviation policy was popularized by Luo Yaokat. It was meant to help the poor villagers become rich. The specific implementation was that the villagers would send workers to assist in the development of the village. The villagers would receive financial subsidies in the form of loans that would be slowly repaid over 10 years. This poverty alleviation policy was initially a joke among the lords who loved to scrape the land. Luo Yaokat was also ridiculed as a foolish young master who spent money recklessly for the sake of reputation. However, a year later, the data slapped these people's faces swollen. Akat Hill's tax revenue took off, and it wasn't a normal takeoff. It took off like a rocket, and it directly doubled. And this was only the first year. According to the internal documents of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce, it was estimated that this rapid growth would continue for at least 5 years. How is it? Xia Luot, do you still think that Luo Yaokat is ignorant and incompetent? If this was really a decision made by him, then this person is not simple. Maybe he is a genius. The reddish-brown-haired girl couldn't help but praise. This made Bruce sigh in relief, and he also threw out his trump card. Not only that, Akat Hill recently submitted a cooperative development plan to us. It involves the entire southern part of Akat Hill and northern part of Rose. I think this plan is very good. What do you think? Chapter 128. In the depths of the holy capital's palace. Nuaire? Wait, calm down, don't. Clang. In a dark room reserved for the banquet, a blonde girl and a black-haired boy stared at each other. 2 years had passed, and both of their appearances had changed a little. The black-haired boy, Luoya, was no exception. 2 years had made his appearance more similar to the one in his past life. He had lost some of his childishness and gained some of the toughness of a man. His face was less adorable, but more handsome and spirited. The biggest change was his height. Luoya had grown a lot in the past 2 years. His body was more slender, and his shoulders were wider. However, because his family had been practicing spells for generations, he had inherited a small bone structure. Therefore, he didn't look very muscular. Luoya had changed a lot, but it was still a little lacking compared to Nuaire. As the saying goes, a woman changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood. Miss Angel's transformation was also obvious. Her blonde hair was still the same as before, but her temperament had lost a lot of her childishness. Gradually, she began to transform into a mature woman. She had grown taller, and her appearance had also become more mature. Her eyes and smile revealed confidence and dominance, and her aura had become more and more like a queen. She was less adorable than a child, and more attractive than a woman. Especially her chest, it was now a little bigger than the tablet 2 years ago. Simply put, she was becoming more and more beautiful. Looking at Nuaire's appearance, Luoya would be lying if he said that he wasn't tempted. However, before that, he had to ensure his own safety. That's right. Standing in front of the blonde girl, he could feel that Noelle was too excited, and her emotions were a little out of control. The proof was that the two of them looked at each other for less than 5 seconds. and Miss Angel panted and pushed him to the ground before riding him. Luoya fell to the ground, and the chair fell to the ground with a clang. It was like a heavy hammer hitting the boy's heart. He held his breath and listened carefully. He noticed that no one in the corridor seemed to be coming to check on them. The boy let out a long sigh of relief and wiped his forehead. He couldn't help but look at the girl on top of him. Her cheeks were bright red. Are you crazy? There were so many people outside. Speaking of which, why did you bring me here for your birthday? Don't you care about the people who come to see you? I can't help it. It's been 2 years since we last met. I can't hold it in any longer. Can't help it? Wait, what are you doing? No, Oh. The young man's forced smile was broken. Before he could finish his words, his lips were forcefully kissed. Luoya's hands reached out to push the girl away, but his wrists were clamped down by an even greater force and pressed to the ground. Nuo-Ire heard the noise of the crowd outside the door, and it gave the angel of abuse a different kind of pleasure. The intense excitement gradually heated up her body, and Nuo-Ire relied on her last bit of rationality to separate herself. She felt that it was time for her to control herself. Phew. What are you doing all of a sudden? What are you doing? Kissing. So, a normal person would kiss in this position in the dark room after not seeing each other for 2 years. What's the matter? You've done this 2 years ago. The golden-haired girl curled her lips as if she was doing this with ease. Luoya, whose face was flushed red from the Nuo-Ire's attack, was panting heavily. He struggled to retract his arms, but it was futile. Give up. I'm at origin level 4. You can't break free. So why are you holding me down? Do you even need to ask? Of course, it's because I like the feeling of forcefully making you mine in a place where those noble ladies who surround you can't see. Ah, your expression is so cute. Seriously, don't seduce me like this. I seduced you, my ass. Luoya could not help but retort at the golden-haired girl's perverted words. He struggled a little more, and looked at the beautiful Nuo-Ire in a gown with a strong sense of aggression in her eyes. He gave up completely. I say, don't we talk every week? That counts as a meeting, right? You mean the few minutes of watching your sister by your side every week? Luoya's words made the golden-haired angel raise her eyebrows. Her words were full of sarcasm, and it was obvious that she was angry. Luoya's face was more or less embarrassed. Originally, using the Holy One's short blade skill, Afterglow of the Crown, the Nuo-Ire's image could meet Luoya once a week for about 5 minutes. This skill was originally used by Miss Angel to check on him, but because the skill was mostly activated at night, when the Nuo-Ire appeared, Luoya was usually together with the AI Lizzie. Chapter 129. In a short period of time, a close-range fight took place in the empty room. Luoya, who was in a disadvantageous position, actively resisted. He kicked his legs and stretched his arms like a carp king that had come ashore. However, even in the face of such fierce resistance, Miss Angel was still at ease. The golden spell flashed several times, and 2 golden rings wrapped around Luoya's wrists. Nuo-Ire held his waist in place. Miss Angel gently moved her body twice, and Luoya's face turned red and he didn't dare to move. When you struggle, I'm really excited. You're really a pervert. It's been 2 years, and your mouth is still so bad. After several rounds of resistance, Roja's cheeks were caressed by the Tyrant Noel. The girl's blue eyes were shining because of the power of the spell, and the sadistic smile on her face became heavier and heavier. Soon, she seemed to have thought of a good idea and tapped her hand. How about this? If you learn to bark like a dog and call me master, I'll consider letting you go. How about it? Miss Angel pinched Luoya's collar, and her eyes narrowed in excitement. She looked at the man under her with a face full of expectation and temptation. Although you want me to step on you, won't that dirty your clothes? Or are you willing to accept my bare feet? I'll accept your ass. Facing this situation where it was either mental or physical abuse, Luoya's face twitched, and he couldn't help but curse. The reason why he resisted so desperately was that he knew that it wouldn't be good if he was dragged in by this masochist. Speaking of which, you killed a lot of mutants in the eastern region, right? Shouldn't your fetish be satisfied? Ah, the screams of those monsters were indeed quite pleasant, but to be honest, they were a little low-level. Nua Iyer rubbed his chin with his finger and blinked, as if he was recalling the feeling of being in a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. At first, I thought that I would be very excited, but after experiencing it, I felt that it was just a release of the evil and warlike side of my heart. After all, no matter how many dirty wild dogs there are, how can they be compared to my favorite pet? Miss Angel looked down with her burning eyes. She felt that her appetite had been spoiled by Luoya. After tasting the delicacies, that kind of coarse bread is just a temporary buffer. So, what do you think? What do you think? You're such a sadist. Luoya cursed madly in his heart, and began to think about how to break out of this situation. However, before he could do anything, a cold voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. Your Highness Nua Iyer, can you please stop bullying my elder brother? Tisk. The moment she heard this voice, the golden-haired girl was speechless. She straightened her body and turned around, only to see the silver-haired girl staring at her coldly. 2 years had passed, and AI Lizzie had changed a lot. Her petite body had grown a lot in these 2 years, and she had become more ladylike. Her face had lost some of the fleshy feeling of a child, and became more delicate. Her pair of red eyes were still the same, and her temperament, like that of a flower on a high mountain, was more obvious. Now AI Lizzie's beauty was famous in the theocracy. Her soul-stirring beauty was like a mass-produced machine of love at first sight. Many nobles were addicted to her beauty and desperately tried to curry favor with her. However, in the face of these fanatical pursuers, AI Lizzie did not show any mercy and secretly taught them a lesson many times. However, unlike in the outside world, when Luoya was in front of this cold and unapproachable girl, she would suddenly transform and throw herself into his arms with a smile. Nua Iyer was speechless at AI Lizzie's behavior of pretending to be an obedient child in front of Luoya. And Luoya was indeed deceived by her pretense. Every time, she would patiently comfort the frightened AI Lizzie and use her young age as an excuse to reject all the suitors. Of course, those dissatisfied nobles had also sent letters to the two's father, Marquis Kadia, but they were all like stones thrown into the sea. Nua Iyer understood this. AI Lizzie was a genius, and Marquis Kadia would never let her go unless his brain was knocked out by a mutant. AI Lizzie, I haven't seen Luoya for 2 years. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate to interrupt us at this time? The blonde girl turned her head and narrowed her eyes. Her expression was obviously not good. AI Lizzie heard her and said indifferently, I can understand your feelings, Your Highness, but as the main character of the birthday party after 2 years, your absence has caused a commotion. Of course, the most important thing is that Father is back. Father? AI Lizzie's words caused Luoya to react violently. Nua Iyer's expression also changed when she heard this. She removed the restraints of the curse, and Luoya immediately sat up. Marquis Kadia had been the logistics department head for the front lines for more than 2 years. During this period, he had only returned home once. It could be said that they rarely met up. Now that he had suddenly returned to the holy capital, it was a pleasant surprise for Luoya. Father is back from the front lines? Didn't he say that he couldn't make it to the birthday party because of a mission? It seems that he completed it ahead of time. Chapter 130. He has a marriage contract? How is that possible? Why don't you know about it? You heard it too. It was a marriage contract signed 100 years ago. Father never mentioned it, so of course I don't know about it. Then what do we do now? It's fine if it's someone else, but it has to be that Sorophia Xiaoluot. In the palace, Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie were blaming each other on both sides of the tea table. The source of their worries was undoubtedly the news brought by Kadia, who rushed back a few days ago. Luoya Akat, the lover of Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie, had known them for 3 years. However, a few days ago, during the banquet, he suddenly received an explosive news. He had a fiancé, and this fiancé was a very powerful person. Xiaoluot Sorophia was a beauty whose name spread throughout Xia. It was said that her beauty was as flawless as the fairies in the myths. She was an existence that made people want to give her everything they had when they saw her. She was an existence that would make people burn with love and lust. Of course, this was only her appearance. In terms of status, she was the eldest daughter of the Sorofia family, and the future leader of the family. In terms of personal talent, it was said that she was a rare business genius, a top designer, and an artist in the fashion industry. She was an all-rounder that no one could find fault with. It's troublesome, it's really troublesome this time. It's fine if it's someone else, but definitely not Xia Luot. Your Highness, you've seen her before? Yes, I've seen her once. It was last year when I visited Rose before I went to the front lines. When AI Lizzie asked this question, Nua Ire responded with silence. After hearing this question, Miss Angel frowned. After a long time, she finally spoke with difficulty about her feelings at that time. I'm moved. What? I said that the moment I saw her, my heart sped up. Do you understand? The Nua Ire held her forehead as if she had given up on herself. She couldn't believe what she was feeling. The silver-haired girl stared at the Nua Ire, and suddenly stepped back in fear. Miss Angel was stunned. AI Lizzie. What are you thinking? For the record, I don't like girls. No, Your Highness, you don't have to explain. I actually support you. AI Lizzie waved her hand with an understanding expression that said, You'd better find that Xia Luot and spend the rest of your life together. This made Nua Ire even angrier. That's why it's strange. That girl has a kind of magical power. It's not charm, but something of a higher level. Perhaps it's because of her bloodline, but she has a strange sense of nobility. Nobility? Yes, and the rumors about her appearance weren't exaggerated. That girl's charm is real. That's why I said it's too dangerous. If even I am moved, how can Luoya not be moved? Nua Ire muttered to herself as she clenched her fists. She suddenly thought of Wei Dualia's situation. In history, Wei Dualia's relationship was thwarted because Ponte got married first. She endured for more than 20 years. Nua Ire felt that it was already very miserable. She didn't expect that it would be even worse for her. Luoya also had a marriage contract. Once she became a Nua Ire, she wouldn't even be able to endure. Endure until an elf dies? Isn't this a joke? No. We can't just sit here and wait for death. We have to find a way to stop this marriage. But what should we do? This kind of marriage contract is 100 years old. Elder brother can't unilaterally reject it, right? AI Lizzie's words caused the atmosphere in Nua Ire's room to become heavy. There was no way to unilaterally reject it. This was the most troublesome part about marriage contracts. Setting aside the novels for now, in reality, almost none of the nobles would break off a marriage contract. The more powerful the nobles were, the more likely they were to break off all pretense of cordiality. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if two people were suitable for each other in a political marriage. As long as the person married into the family, it was fine. Most people would marry in name even if they weren't suitable for each other. For example, Ponte even fulfilled his obligation to have a child. Nua Ire began to feel dizzy at the thought of Xia Luot fulfilling her obligation to have Luoya's child. AI Lizzie's face also turned pale and her body swayed. The marriage contract must be reasonable. Both parties must agree to it. Luoya's side is fine, but Xia Luot's side is almost impossible. Why? She doesn't even know elder brother, but she wants to marry him? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.